Now more than ever, innovative technologies are fueling change and sparking new ways of thinking. Collaboration between corporations and startups is key to staying at the forefront of these trends. However, finding the right startups can be expensive, time-consuming, and ineffective. But Plug and Play is here to help. As a corporate partner, you will gain access to a whole ecosystem of innovation. Discover startups that meet your tech interests. Stay updated on the latest trends and network with industry peers. We will help you during every stage of your innovation journey, no matter where you are and where you want to go. Get in touch today.
First of all, welcome to Paris for Fashion Week. You guys are all looking very fashionable today. We're really excited to be here. This is our first event in a long time hosted in Paris, and our first Innovation Day that we're doing in Europe. So we're really excited for this event, and we're really happy that everyone can make it here. So our agenda today is, it'll be very brief with me. I'll be roughly 10 minutes. Then I'm going to pass it over to our keynote speaker from Novozymes. We'll have 10 startups pitching, split up into 3 sections, so you can see them there. We'll have a break between them. And then lastly, we'll have some closing remarks, and we'll follow it up with a networking lunch. So I'm going to give some general remarks on Plug and Play for those of you that are unfamiliar. So Plug and Play is now one of the largest, what we call innovation platforms in the world. So really our work centers around 3 main pillars. So at its core is really running these acceleration programs. We have about 60 of them across the globe. So all these kind of industry-specific platforms work alongside large corporations and startups, and really these programs are designed to create a community around all these different players and hopefully form partnerships, particularly between the startups and venture and corporate innovation communities. So the second thing we do is around corporate innovation. So we provide strategic deal flow for a variety of large corporations across the globe. Novozymes is one of these partners. We take their strategic challenges and deliver lists of companies that we think can help solve these challenges with the hope that there is an investment or piloting or commercialization opportunity. And the last pillar is associated with the other 2. Within all these startups that we work with, we find roughly 200 every year that we can invest in ourselves. So we do about 200 deals, all very small check sizes, but across a variety of different industries and stages. Here's the food team. So you'll see some of these familiar faces today. Unfortunately, most of them are stuck back in the States. But today you'll see Alex, Toda, and myself, as well as Gabby, who really spent a lot of time putting this all together. Here you can see the majority of our U.S. Corporate sponsors. So these are the companies that really make our program possible. They fund it as well as provide strategic direction on where we run events, how we run them, and the types of companies that are involved. Here are the 10 startups that are pitching today. They are all in person. Thankfully, COVID did not cancel this, nor did the greve that we are experiencing now in Paris. So we're really excited to see these companies pitch today. Generally, our program covers these pillars. We're today focusing on biotechnology, but generally our program is all around ingredient innovation, packaging, supply chain, food safety, data analytics, and biotech. So there's a wide set of interest areas that all of our partners agree upon twice per year for our program to focus on. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to our keynote, Frederick, who will now take the stage. Welcome.
And thanks for not trying to pronounce the last name. That's for Danes only. So I thought today I will not talk about Novozymes. If you're interested in Novozymes, you can reach out to me or one of my colleagues here later, and we can do that. Rather, we try and talk a little bit about why do we think open innovation is important, and what do we think consumers are asking for in the food and beverage industry. So what is it that we're trying to achieve together with you? Help. Oh, here we are. Brian, help. don't know. The green one?
Yeah, the green one's forward. You have to kind of hold it.
I have to kind of hold it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it takes a moment to register.
All right. Okay. So with that, open innovation. So why do we invest in open innovation? First, on what's happening on the food and beverage side. Our planet or our food systems are undergoing a massive transformation. We need to feed 9 billion people in less than 20 years. COVID just hit. We've got a massive recession coming up. So really starting to see resilient supply chains being really, really important. So the food systems of yesterday are not the food systems of tomorrow. Second, investments in food tech have just exploded. So average growth rate over the past 10 years has been 80%. We estimate that more than $30 billion were put into food startups like yourself last year. That's a massive amount of money, and it's going much more to the startup. So it's on much more hands today than just 10 years ago, where it sat on the established players. And then finally, and that's probably the most important bit, consumers are just adopting new trends faster and faster. The rise of e-commerce. Look at a country like China, where if you look at some of their online platforms, more than 70% of the SKUs moving there are launched within the last 2 years. So consumers are a lot more curious and they want to adopt new foods faster, which again puts, it adds opportunity, but it also puts demand on the players that deliver to food and beverage. Now, from our part, how do you solve this? We think that the era of the conglomerate is over. It's about partnerships where we each focus on what we're good at. It's about cross-fertilizing, so we put together people who are good at data science, people who are good at microbiome, people who are good at food ingredients, some who can do startup, and so on and so forth. And that's really why we are here today, to learn from you guys and figure out what's moving and how we can make 1 + 1 = 3. So with that, I'll go over a little bit to what I'll talk about. So just very briefly, major trends in food and beverages. Focus on 2 things that we think are the 2 key drivers. The healthy wave and sustainability. How can we make the planet a better place to live? And then thirdly, and the one that we see quite a few forgetting, how do you actually reach the consumer at the end of the day? So let me start with what I call the Maslow's pyramid of food and beverages. I think you've all heard about better for the planet. People want less waste, lower carbon footprint, less water consumption, locally sourced products, and it needs to be plant-based. At the same time, it needs to be better for me. Less of the bad, less sugar, less fat, less salt. More of the good, natural, and plant-based again. So these trends are what a lot of people in the food and beverage industry are talking about. What some people tend to forget is the base of the pyramid, which nothing works without these 3 qualifiers being in place. You need something that's affordable. So no one's going to pay 10 times as much for beef just because it's cultured. Or, well, some are, but it's very, very few. It needs to be tasty. I'm going to sample a product and try it out, but if it doesn't taste good, I'm not going to come back. And it needs to be convenient. I mean, if I buy a meat analog and I put it on a frying pan, it needs to act like I expect a meat to act. So if it's a whole new cooking process, that's just a huge barrier for me to adopt that at scale. So that's the Maslow pyramid of food and beverages. If we zoom in on health, what's going on in health? At Novozymes, we see a move from big food to big health. And we've done quite a bit of consumer surveys on this. So we went out, we asked consumers, okay, how do you want to improve your health and wellness? And if you ask 5,000 consumers across the globe, this is what they answer. We give them 3 options. Improving your health and wellness. Do you want to take medicine? Do you want to take supplements? Or do you want to get it via your food and beverages? And more than half actually say, okay, this is something I want via my food and beverages. This answer, we haven't run it 10 years ago, but I'm pretty convinced that dietary supplements would have had a much, much higher respondent back then. So what's holding consumers back to doing a healthier consumption? So first, as I said, a lot of consumers want healthy. Just an example here, we asked how many want to do plant-based. So more than 30% of European consumers are looking to increase plant-based in their diet. However, 44% find it difficult or very difficult to eat a healthier diet. So it's a barrier, it's a hassle for me to figure out how do I eat more healthy. and only 25% find it easy or very easy. So while there are some educated consumers that know how to use their diet to live a healthier life, the majority of them find it hard, and that's something we can help with. That leads us to what we call the aspiration gap. So a lot of consumers want to do the top arrow that I showed there. They want to use their food and beverages to become more healthy, but they don't really know how to do it. They think it's hard. They don't think it's easy to find good products that can help me do it. Or for some, they think the products are out there, but they don't really taste good, or they're hard to cook with, and so on, as I explained before. Diving into health, we see 4 parameters: more plant-based, more of the good, less of the bad, and offsetting. I won't talk to all of them. I'll just skip through this one. Instead, I'll talk to less of. So I think you're all aware of the less sugar, less fat, less salt. We also see consumers demanding cleaner labels. I think you're fairly aware, but if you look at a lot of the plant-based products that are out there, they're full of artificial additives. They're full of ingredients that people don't know. One of the key barriers we see when we ask consumers about what's holding you back from eating more plant-based is that it's what they call hyper-processed. I even have people amongst my team who say they don't want to eat meat analogs today because it's basically not a very healthy product. You shall remain unnamed here. Another strategy that consumers use quite a bit is what we call offsetting. So that's the one where you go, okay, I go out and I have a fantastic dinner. I probably have a little bit too much sugar and a little bit too much fat. And then I try and offset it the day after. So either it's by simply holding back the next day, or it's can I get products that have a targeted benefit? Can I get a probiotic that helps my stomach feel more at ease after a really fatty or spicy meal? So that's a trend that we see quite a bit of potential in. At the same time, you can actually see when we go out and ask how consumers they do health via their food, it's the 3rd most popular answer. So 15% of consumers actually say they use offsetting actively as a strategy to improve their health. Moving on to sustainability. Health is very near and dear to most of us. It's something I can see and I can feel. Sustainability is less of a personal concept. So we can see that while health, most consumers want that and they act upon it in the supermarket. Sustainability is harder. People feel overwhelmed. I got a quote here from a consumer talking about there's just so much information about sustainability. Don't eat meat, buy local, don't buy local. Do I need to buy a tomato from Scandinavia where I live, where it's made close to where I live? Or do I need to buy it from Spain, where the climate is different and the science keeps changing? And depending on who I ask, I get a different answer. So I'm just overwhelmed. Secondly, when you have to, at the end of the day, you need to make priorities. So when I'm faced with the choice, can I either get something sustainable or something healthy? Most consumers are going to choose healthy over sustainable. And then thirdly, a lot of people actually answer that sustainability, that's something macro, that's something that society and government helps me doing. So I've got a quote here from a Chinese consumer who says, sustainability is important, it's something that the government helps me doing. Some numbers on sustainability and food and beverages. So 63% of consumers find that climate change is very serious. Half of consumers find that are worried that it will impact their life within the next 5 years. And unlike what we thought 2 years ago when COVID hit, we thought, okay, now sustainability is going to fall completely off the map. It hasn't. It's actually increased in that period. However, when we then ask consumer, okay, when you stand in the supermarket shelf, what's the most important factor for you to make your purchasing criteria? Sustainability comes in as the 7th most popular. So if you look at the list, it's the good old classic. It needs to be tasty. I'm not going to buy anything unless it tastes good. So taste is still king. It needs to be healthy. It needs to be priced right. It needs to be natural. I need to trust the brand. It needs to have the right mouthfeel. and then it needs to be sustainable. So it's really long down the list. That's actually quite surprising. Again, this is a consumer study we ran this spring with 5,000 consumers across the globe. We were quite surprised to see sustainability this low on the agenda. So we tried and double click a bit on it. So we believe that we're looking at something where today sustainability is desirable. And if I can get a product that gives me both sustainability and health, I'm gonna buy it. But sustainability is an added benefit. It's a nice to have, it's not a need to have, whereas the healthy parameter is very often a need to have. On the other hand, we can also see a generational gap. So if we take that consumer survey I mentioned before, and we look at, okay, when are people born? So if they're born after 1980, essentially, sustainability is much more of a deciding factor. So we do believe that it'll move from number 7 up in the coming years, but we're talking 5-10 years. It's simply not the reality in the supermarket today. Then I'll round off with a little bit on how can you reach the consumer. So I said it before, taste and texture is just the most important parameter still. And it's actually, when you look at food tech, that's often what's lacking. There's a lot of options out there on meat analogs, dairy analogs, plant-based yogurts today, but they don't taste like we expect them to taste. And that's the key barrier to being successful today. You can also see, again, surveys here on what's needed in a meat analog, what needs to improve. It needs to taste better. The texture needs to be better. It needs to cook like I expect a piece of meat to cook. It needs to have a better nutritional value. There's so many things to fix. Moving on, and this is the final thing, the final trend I'll leave you with. I talked a bit about convenience. So consumers are balancing aspiration for doing healthy, a little less of an aspiration for doing sustainable, with an aspiration to we all live busy lives. So I come home, I have 3 screaming kids. How am I gonna take the fight and try and put a plant-based burger into them if it doesn't taste well? So consumers, they find 3 paths to getting convenience at home with their food and beverages. Number 1 is own cooking. Okay, so how can I cook recipes that are easy to do? How can we help them with that? I don't know, anybody here knows on average a Western consumer how many different meals they can prepare? I see. Yeah, what do you think? It's a little bit higher. It's between 6 and 8. If you go west of the Atlantic, it's probably closer to 5. If you're here in Europe, it's probably a little bit higher than 5. So that's what we're looking at. That also means if you want to introduce a plant-based chicken and it cooks in a different way, that needs to take the place of one of the other dishes I can make. That's a really big barrier to overcome. So the key thing we can do as food tech providers is to provide consumers with options that are easy to cook. Of course, if you've got just the right thing, you may actually be able to put out that spaghetti bolognese that every consumer out there can make, but it's a pretty significant barrier to overcome. The second bit we see is convenience food. So we've just seen a massive rise of eating out or ready to cook meals that you can buy. So that's certainly also a massive trend. And then finally, and that's probably also the one that's quite interesting to the people in this room, is the snacking trend. Consumers are really looking for something that's easy, that I can do on the go, can also enable offsetting, like I talked of before. Can I get a superfood where, okay, I've just had a meal that I know wasn't so good to me? Can I get some antioxidants? Can I get something that will help my stomach, and so on and so forth? Now, if we take all of this and put it together, this is probably the key slide I want to leave you with today. If you look at the transition of a food system, this graph shows you how we look at this. So when you make a new product, this is the example of a plant-based product. First, you will flip the vegans and the vegetarians, okay? They're just looking for an animal-based alternative, and they'll eat pretty much anything as long as it's not animal-based. Think about some of the, talk to some of you today on the plant-based cheeses that are out there today. There's actually products that are selling. It's mainly to the vegans and vegetarians today. That's 5% of the consumer base. Next, you get the flexitarians. They'll eat. They're more forgiving than most of us, but you need to fix some of the taste and texture challenges. They're not going to eat just everything. It needs to taste well. Then, as you move along, if you can start fixing the nutrition profile, you can make it affordable. There's a clean label. It's not filled with all sorts of E-numbers. You'll move quite a lot of consumers. Then you'll probably move more than 2/3 of the total consumer base if you've got some of these challenges fixed. And then finally, you've got the 20% that are quite agnostic. They don't really care about what they eat. It needs to taste good and it needs to be cheap. So this is the challenge ahead of us. I would claim that on the plant-based and on the precision fermentation, we're only at the maybe 5%, maybe 10%. I think I put two figures up here on plant-based meat. That's around 2% of the total share in the US. Clearly, we've got a product there that can improve a lot more. Plant-based milks, we're a bit further. 15%, we've gotten the flexitarians. Oat milk is huge in both US and Europe and starting in Asia as well. It's not very nutritious. If you really want to move that, you need to find something that has a better nutrition profile. So with that, maybe there's even time for a few questions. Opening up the floor. Yeah.
Regarding taste, what have you found consumers are looking for? Are they looking to replicate animal products or experience new sensory profiles?
That's a really good question. So firstly, I should be clear that I'm not a Shivut and a Simrise. So if you ask some of the flavor houses, they will have a lot more insights there. But what we're hearing is it needs to taste like I experience it too, like I'm used to. So it's very much about just replicating what's out there. Of course, if you can do something that has a new exciting flavor, that's good. But right now, it's really about minimizing off taste and putting it so it acts like I'm used to.
Hello. You mentioned one of the key ways of getting consumers to switch is to get rid of E-numbers. And I think we hear a lot about this in the market, about plant-based meats not being healthy. But when we look at the foods that consumers eat, they are, junk food, biscuits, unhealthy food. How much do you think is kind of what we see in the press around, consumers need healthy meats to make a difference, and how much do you think it's just what people say? Because we know from when we look at marketing research studies that there's always a really big gap between what consumers say they want to eat and then what you actually see in their cupboards.
I think you're absolutely right. So you saw again, 70% of the consumers are really, half of consumers are really concerned about climate change and what it'll do to me in the next 5 years. But only 27% of consumers actually act on it when they stand in the supermarket, even though we know that the food systems are a massive contributor to CO2 emissions. And I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of examples of products with E-numbers out there. Also think I don't have data on it, but I think it's moved massively over the past 5 years. So if you look at how labels have been cleaned up, how many natural colors, how many natural flavors are in there, it's quite astonishing how much sugar reduction you've seen in the industry over the past probably 2 decades. That's been pretty significant. I will say I also see a little bit of a forgiveness from the consumer out there. So if you look at the plant-based meat product, if you launched a non-plant-based product with a label like that today, I don't think you would sell anything at all. We do actually sell 2% of the total meat market in the US. So there's some forgiveness to E-numbers in plant-based right now. I don't think that forgiveness will be there in 5 years.
Last questions. If not, we can let Frederick take his seat. We'll say that's good. Appreciate your time,
Thank you.
Frederick. Well, hello, everybody. My name's Alex Davison. I'll be your MC today. I'll be your moderator today. I will be up here for a while, so get used to all of this. I help run the Plug and Plays Ventures program for food and beverage based out of Chicago. Yeah, that's a little bit about me, and we'll get started with our first startup of today. So welcome up Multus Media and Kai Linton. Multus is working to enable the cultivated meat industry. They are making the growth media for those cells and trying to make it at a more efficient, better cost point.
All right, it's great to be here. So Maltus really does create the key ingredients to make cultivated meat more affordable and profitable. I can get this right. Okay, so we have an opportunity in our hands today to really create a step change in food production technology. Cultivated meat is a very new industry, but has this opportunity to reimagine how we produce meat at scale in a way that doesn't harm the planet. We don't need to kill animals, we don't need to use antibiotics, we use far less water, land, and energy. And so if this technology is potentially so great, well, why can't we eat it today? So if we look at the process of making cultivated meat, there are 3 key steps. So first you need your cells. You can grow the finest animal in the land. You take your cells and it's then happy still in that field. You then need to provide the right nutrients for that muscle tissue, that fat tissue to grow. You provide your sugars, your amino acids, your fats and vitamins, but also these signaling molecules called growth factors that kind of direct cell growth in a way that's suitable for large-scale production. And then just like we see in the brewing industry, we use large-scale metal tanks called bioreactors that then provide the right environment for these products to grow. So this is the process, and in my view, a very elegant process for making meat at scale, one that really only produces the meat that we want to consume and allows us that flexibility to make something very healthy or very tasty or somewhere in the middle. So the big problem here is that 80% of production costs come from the feed we use to grow cells. And traditional technologies we've used in the pharmaceutical industry are just not suitable for the food industry. For example, fetal blood serum, FBS, is used across biomedical research to feed cells, but this is very expensive, obviously has ethical and environmental considerations that don't align with the cultivated meat industry, and is dramatically limited by scale. So at Maltus, we've created Proliferum M. It's the first all-in-one replacement to fetal bovine serum that grows muscle, fat, and connective tissue for the cultivated meat industry. We launched this just February this year and are already selling to a number of companies across this industry, but also getting interest from traditional biotech and biomedical researchers as well. So really, our kind of key technology here is that we focus on performance, cost, and scale. We do a lot of work on new ingredient design and selection, working on alternative sources for things like sugar and amino acids, looking also at protein engineering and precision fermentation to produce growth factors affordably at scale. And then we need to bring these together to actually create a recipe, a formulation that grows different kinds of cultivated meat tissues from different animal species in an effective and scalable way. So we're really enabling this industry to accelerate towards products on the market and reach price parity as soon as possible. We're targeting all the different kinds of companies in this industry with different offerings, whether that be a Proliferum M, which is available off the shelf, or growth factors that are that can feed into a supply chain, or customization services where we use our processes to actually design new and unique formulations for different kinds of cultivated meat tissues. So this is us. We're a team of 12 people based in London. We're growing and scaling our team in R&D, production, and business development, and recently been awarded €2.5 million by the European Commission for the EIC accelerator. And we're very interested in engaging with strategic partners that can work with us to scale our manufacturing and supply chain towards our mission of making cultivated meat the affordable and available choice for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Just to make things go smoothly, startups or anyone presenting, just hold the mic a little bit closer. Kai, you did great, but just want to make sure we everyone can hear who's talking. So next up, we have Paul McKee with Protero Bio. They're making smarter, more sustainable proteins for the food industry. And so without further ado.
Thanks, Alex. So thanks to Novozymes and Plug and Play for organising today. How good is it to be back in person? Okay, this is our vision. Biology, particularly synthetic biology, is the way of the future. And here's a big number, $4 trillion. This is coming from a McKinsey report from 2020. And this is pooling all the opportunities in synthetic biology. So food, pharma, medical, and of course we've all been, well hopefully all of us, have been the recipient of some of the advances in synthetic biology with of course the COVID vaccine. So it's a big opportunity. And we are focusing specifically on food. I'm not going to insult your intelligence or experience by talking about these megatrends that you all know very, very well. But basically there's a lot of challenges that we can meet with synthetic biology and food. And the technology and the proteins that I'm going to talk about today are definitely in the bullseye of these two megatrends on the right-hand side. So alternative proteins and clean label ingredients. So here's Proterra in a nutshell. We're actually celebrating our 7th anniversary next week. So Proterra has been around in different guises since 2015, starting as GEA enzymes in Chile. And actually, you'll see there that the large majority of the team is still Chilean and based in Chile. And things really got moving when the founders were in part of IndieBio in San Francisco a few years back, where they met our beloved sponsor, Josko Bovanovic, who's in the room somewhere, part of Sophie Nova. And with Sophie Nova, we ran a very successful Series A campaign over 2 tranches in 2020, 2021. And that led also to the establishment of our headquarters in Paris, Proterra SAS. And the big news, of course, there is we're in the middle of our Series B fundraising campaign. So obviously we're very keen to dialogue with anybody who'd be interested in understanding what that opportunity is about. So today we're about 3/4 based in Chile, 1/4 in France. So we're about 43 people in total. And basically we have a lot of technology transfer from the majority of our in silico team. This will all make sense when I explain what we do in a moment. The majority of our in silico team and our early stage fermentation labs in Chile. And then we have a technology transfer up to where we scale up everything in France. We have a large team based in Piver, in Compiègne, for those of you who know Piver. We have our own equipment and of course access to all the other facilities at Piver to successfully scale up our proteins. You can see there are our investors as of Series A. So as I mentioned, led by Sophie Nova partners. And you can see there ICL and Grupo Bimbo, 2 industrial investors. They joined last year. And of course, that's a big vote of confidence for what we're doing. Okay, so what are we doing? Well, basically, we are using AI to discover, optimize, and even create from scratch proteins that we then bring to life in the real world using precision fermentation. So why proteins? Well, as I'm sure you're all aware, proteins are pretty exciting because they have an unbelievable breadth of functionality. And the cool thing about what I'm going to show you in a moment, our AI technology, is it's agnostic to what type of protein. So whether it's a peptide, a polypeptide, a protein, an enzyme, it doesn't matter. We can apply our technology to it. So that means that the very strong technology we've got can be applied to any kind of functionality that we're looking to replace. So proteins can be emulsifiers, antimicrobials, colors, taste or taste modifiers, texturants. These are all things that we have experience in exploring. And of course, we have the ambition to be sustainable. We heard earlier that that's one of the key trends in plant-based or alternative proteins, of course. And we're using precision fermentation, as I mentioned. And our ambition is to have a much lower footprint than the ingredients that we're looking to replace. And of course, they're natural. There are billions of proteins in nature, and they've been evolved and designed elegantly by nature. And therein lies the challenge, because where do you start? Which proteins do you choose? And obviously, companies like Novozymes have got a lot of experience searching for different protein-based ingredients, especially enzymes, of course. But there are still hundreds of millions of proteins to choose from. And there's always a risk when we take those to the fermentation lab, which is where things start getting really costly and really timely, right? It takes a long time to optimize these enzymes or proteins. we don't know whether we actually selected the right proteins in the first place. We're running a little bit blind. Well, not blind, but we're running with what we can see with the naked eye. And of course, it's very expensive to scale up each of these proteins or enzymes, and typically the processes are quite unique to each protein. So this is an example of how protein engineering works today. It's a roughly linear process. So we start with an opportunity, we identify some potential solutions, and then we look to optimize these solutions. But it's really in quite a linear process. Even though we are, of course, leveraging huge advances in data science over the last couple of decades, it is still quite a lot of trial and error. And the risk is that we can, of course, de-optimize certain things that we're trying to optimize at each step. So it's hard to get a global optimization of everything. So it could be that we have an interesting enzyme. We look to optimize its functionality, whether it's a proteolytic activity or a lipolytic activity. That's great, we optimize that. Then we go to optimize its production, and we end up de-optimizing some of the functionality. So yeah, it's quite challenging to have this linear process and end up with something that's really, truly optimized at the end. The other thing that's interesting is, as I mentioned, we're running a little bit blind in that we're not necessarily working with all the possible candidates. So in addition to the high R&D and time investment, it's possible that we actually overlook some candidates. So what I'm going to show to you today is Maddie, which is our very powerful and groundbreaking AI technology to actually improve protein development. Oops, I lost one. I'm missing a pretty important slide there. That's strange. Okay, that's really unfortunate. Okay, so basically, Maddie is about, we use Maddie in many different ways. We've got lots of different modules for discovery, for optimization, and even designing proteins or enzymes from scratch in a de novo process. And the most important value that Maddie provides straight away is the discovery of different candidates. As I mentioned, that might not be visible to the naked eye. So straight away, we start with much more compelling candidates and much more candidates. So for example, it could be that we're looking for a texturizing functionality. And so with a traditional approach, we'd look in the usual places for these texturizing proteins. We'd leverage all the knowledge about texturizing proteins. But what if we find with our AI tool a texturizing protein in the stalk of a dandelion? So that's the thing we can do. Our AI technology is agnostic to the source of the proteins and the native functionality. We're looking for functionality that might not be known to experts. And then we can, it's a multivariate approach where we can actually optimize things like the functionality, the expression, the production, thermostability, stability to pH or acidity, sorry. And we can optimize for that all at the same time. So we actually globally optimize the value of the protein or the enzyme.
Paul, I hate to interrupt, but if you could wrap it up in 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
So we marry this, where we're quite unique is we marry this to a biotechnology platform. Most of that's in Chile, and then we scale up in France. Ah, there it is. It was, okay, it somehow got mixed up. Well, I think you'll all have these slides afterwards, so you'll see the data. So our first product, proof of concept of this end-to-end approach is ProTerraGuard. This is an antifungal for bread. Very impressive functionality, and also we intend for this to be very cost competitive compared to synthetic alternatives. We're currently at 2,000 litre fermentation scale, so we're at pilot stage. Samples from those fermentation trials have been used by our key partners, sales and distribution partners in the baking industry. And then I'll just quickly jump to the opportunities to collaborate with us. We offer our Maddie services to especially for companies such as Novozymes and others that have got all their own data and their own biotech capabilities. We can do co-developments together where we actually leverage your application and market knowledge and our biotech and AI. Or of course, we're looking for sales and distribution partners for our own ingredients. And as I mentioned, we're in the middle of Series B campaign, so any interest there would be great. Here's our team very quickly. You've got this on in the slides later. As I mentioned, mostly in Chile with some of us, including myself, in France. And here's our rockstar board. I will just mention this because most of you would know Thomas, I'm sure. Josko, as I mentioned, is in the room, and Osvaldo, industry experience from DSM and BASF, and once again, our investors. Thank you so much, and thank you for the
Thanks,
the
Paul.
little bit of overtime.
No worries. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, awesome. We're keep the show rolling. Like Paul said, we will have everyone's decks available. So if anyone wants them, feel free to reach out to anyone on the Plug and Play team, to Paul or any of the startups specifically, and we can definitely facilitate that. Next, we have Nutropy. They are making precision fermented dairy proteins to put into premium French cheeses, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. And hello to everyone. So I'm Nathalie Roland. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Nutropy. So this is a cow, and it's also a very inefficient way of producing milk for cheese. So for 1 kilogram of cheese, actually we need 1,000 liters of water. She emits 15 grams of CO2. And what's more, 70% of cows are raised in intensive farming. So this is actually the problem regarding the global environmental and animal welfare issues. But now let's have a look at the consumer expectations. Just have to wait a little. Nope. Okay. So we have on the market today 2 types of cheeses. The first type is the conventional cheeses. So we love their taste and textures, but unfortunately, they are not so sustainable. We also have plant-based cheeses. They are sustainable, but they don't deliver in terms of taste and texture. So actually, Nutropy offers the best of these 2 worlds, taste and sustainability. So at Nutropy, we are developing a product to offer a gourmet experience to the consumers. We are using our precision fermentation technology to develop products that have the same taste, texture, and nutrition as the real thing. And what you see on these pictures are our prototypes. And actually, we have prototypes for testing today on our booth. Will be able to test it by yourself. So how do we make it happen? So the first step, actually, is to develop our ingredients. So we are developing milk proteins, caseins, and fatty acids. So this is the first step, and we do that with highly selected and engineered yeast. And the step 2, we harvest these ingredients and mix them with other ingredients to formulate our cheeses. So we are first focusing on the development of premium French aged cheeses, because focusing on the premium segment will have the best impact on consumer adoptions, and because our competitors are focusing on more retail cheeses like mozzarella and cheddar. But actually, our technology can develop many types of cheeses and dairy product as well. So the global cheese market represents about 200 billion euros. And we are first targeting the specialty cheese market. That represents 48 billion euros. Because this way, with our premium product, we'll be more easily competitive in this particular market segment. So we are a B2B company. We will sell our cheesable milk solution to food partners, like the one you can see here. And then they will offer a tasty and sustainable product to their customers. So in terms of the competition, so in our sector of dairy precision fermentation, Nutropy is the only company to be focusing on the development of caseins and fatty acids, and be also working on the formulation of premium cheeses, especially premium French aged cheeses. So you can see that companies are not all focusing on the same activities. About our team, so I'm one of the co-founders. I've been working in this field of alternative protein for some years now. So I'm bringing in my huge network in this field, but also my entrepreneurial and business development background. And I'm working with Dr. Bendifala, who is a recombinant protein expert. And she's bringing in huge expertise in protein complexes. And we are not alone. We have a team. We are a team of 8 people today, and this team is led by 3 PhDs. So we have, for example, Dr. Laroudet, who designed thousands of strains before. We have also Dr. Benhard, who earns actually the first PhD in France on alternative cheeses. And we are also working with different advisors, and notably the greatest French cheese experts. So last year we have been working on our 2 proof of concept, so the development of our caseins, and also the first formulation of our cheeses. We also welcomed the first our first team members in our lab, which is based in Genopole, not far from here. And this year, so we are happy to announce that we are just closing our 2 million pre-seed round. And with this money, we'll reach pilot production, so continue working on the development of our ingredient and the formulation of the product. So we are happy to be here today because actually to reach these milestones faster, we are very interested in working with great partners. So for example, partners that have ingredient expertise, also partners who could have access or an equipment that could be of interest for us, like bioreactors. We are also interested in co-developing a product with partners, and we are also interested in financial support because our next round, so the seed round, will be open by the end of this year. So thank you for your attention, and please reach out if you have any question.
Thank you, Nathalie. Not to put you on the spot, but do you have any cheeses to share here today? Perfect. Love that. So downstairs after the event, there'll be networking and a lunch. We can try some French cheeses, and I think there's some quiche and mayonnaise from Le Papandu as well. So look forward to that. Last but not least, for the alternative protein space, we have Firmify. There you are. And welcoming Ava Summer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'm super happy to be here today. And I will talk about my company, Firmify. We are an Austrian company. And I think we all know this banner. So it comes from the Greta Thunberg movement. The wrong Amazon is burning and the wrong ice is melting, or ICE. It depends if you speak German or English. But the governments don't save us, neither do large corporations, because they're really slow in adapting to new technology, and they are not really fast in adapting. So this is where we see our sweet spot. We help huge corporations to bring in technology in-house. So we want to produce the same cheese, but we want to make it better. So we want to develop a production platform for casein proteins. They are super needed to bring the functionality into cheeses. And we want our customers, cheese producers or ingredient companies, to produce the proteins in-house. So we help them to get all in-house what they need to produce fermentation-derived caseins. And why are we doing that? I think I hear it like every day 10 times. I would love to be vegan, but I love cheese, and vegan cheeses are not really an alternative. So this is why we see the need to work on this. And we reach 10 billion people in just a couple of years. So I might be around 50 or 60 by 2015. And I cannot imagine that there will be even more people, but this will happen. And there are no plant-based proteins with the same functionality as in casein proteins. What are we going to do? So we want to build bioreactors, but not only that, but one bioreactor should be 2,000 liter, or 2 or 20,000 liter, but with a 2,000 liter bioreactor that can run modularly. So we are not believing in upscaling, but outscaling. So we want to replace around 80, 90 cows with it, or we can replace 80, 90 cows with the technology where we are, with a 2,000 liter bioreactor. We can produce 18 tons with that, but we want to double the efficiency. This takes time. So by 2027, we will reach this point. And by then, we will reach also a point where we have price comparity with conventional milk. And so, yeah, that's our plan. We want to run the bioprocess continuously. And this is why it takes a while to optimize it. So where do we see our strengths? We work on on strain optimization for sure. It's needed because you cannot buy microbial or yeast strains with a casein in it, but we do not see a commodity, so we don't see that our strong IP lies here. We think in a couple of years it will be a commodity which you can buy at ATCC. So our strong part is really process development. We want to have a continuous process, and it should be fully digitized because we want our customers to run the bioreactor themselves. For that reason, it's needed that they are fully digitized, that farmers or cheese producers who do not have a strong expertise in bioprocess engineering can run the bioreactors with our help. And so our really strong parts are process development, but also process control. We also work on food design. That's really important for us, that we have a feedback loop and know if our proteins are working well for cheese production. But we are working with collaboration partners who are cheese producers and know how to produce cheese. So in the end, we want to produce all the cheeses, and we just need to figure out what kind of inlet material they need to produce cheeses in a traditional way. Our business model is clear. We are a B2B provider. We provide the production platforms, kits to our customers that they can produce in-house. Our product should be fully vegan and sustainable. Even though we are not really focusing 100% on sustainability now, we can reduce CO2 around 60% even without doing anything in comparison to the cow model. And we want to have a very simple and intelligent process. And I think we have a very strong team. So my co-founder and me, we both had an exit within the last 2 years. I had an exit in the cultured meat sector. My co-founder in process digitalization, so he developed an app. We are a very strong team. We are highly interdisciplinary, and we are all protein and pioneers. And when I started this company, by the end of the year, I really looked at the casein market. There are already some players on the market, but most of them really have a B2C model. So they want to have a product, they need to work on marketing and supply chain. We are not good at that, so we are really tech people, and we don't want to go too deep into marketing. And this is why we decided, okay, it makes more sense if our customers produce caseins in-house, because this is where they bring their strong part into it, producing cheese. We are not so good in that. And there are not so many players who can supply them with their needs. Like some of our customers produce 100,000 of tons cheese every day, and we cannot supply them with that ingredient without investing a lot in assets. So we want them to do that. And so we address in particular ingredient and cheese producers, but we also see the need to help governments. There are some governments in the Middle East, but also Southeast Asia, who really want to solve the problem themselves. So they want to have local supply of products. They don't want to import everything. So we support them as well. And for sure also smaller cheese producers or also plant-based cheese producers are interested in our technology. For that reason, we are looking for partners. We already have some, but we really want to engage cheese producers that they can use our proteins already now. So we define our project goal. They tell us what kind of product they want to produce. It makes sense to focus on one in the beginning, and we deliver them with proteins that they can test if it's the right technology for them. And we supply them with samples, and we share our first analysis with them. And then we start drafting either a pilot plant or production plant, depends on the needs of our customers. And yeah, the end point should be that they produce caseins in-house. And so we have strong expectations on our partners. They need to be early adapters, and they need to be fast in making decisions. Some corporations need 2-3 years. That's too slow for us. Yeah, and this is our team. So I made the slides around 2 weeks ago, and we were further growing in the meanwhile. So Christoph and I, we are the founder of the company. We have so all of the people you can see here are scientists. We don't have any marketing people right now, but I recently hired an IP specialist who is helping us on IP, and we also have now a COO and CFO. Both come from the alternative meat space. And yeah, this is where we are. So I started to finance the project myself in the beginning until we had all 4 caseins in our microbial strains, and when we were ready to grow them in bioreactor. And we have investment partners from Switzerland, Germany, and Sweden and Austria. And we are working, or we target the milestones right now. We always reached all of them except point number 3. So as soon as we have reached that, we are ready to raise our next round, which should be a seed round of around 5 million. Having that said, we don't aim to invest too much into assets, so we are using pilot plans from our partners. So we really want to stay very low in assets. And yeah, that's us, Famify. If you have any question, you can always call me, or better not call me, write me on WhatsApp, I'm millennial, or write me an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva. And Eva, you can stay back on stage because now we have the panel discussion. So welcome back up all of our startups, as well as Novozymes. We have Valerio Nannini, who will be representing the Novozymes team. I will be moderating, so forgive my cheat sheet. Let's give it a hand for the startups again. Thank you all for your presentations. Well, welcome. I guess I'll give it over to Valerio first, just to give us a brief introduction since we've heard from everyone else here today.
Well, it's great to be here. It's always good to have a mixture of different people, different stakeholders in this big topic of proteins. It's really a big topic, just for you to know. Today we talk about an industry of 3 trillion. The traditional industry is a 3 trillion business. And today, despite what Frederick said, a lot of investors have gone in there. We are at what we call the more conventional part of the proteins is only around 100 billion. So you clearly understand the gap is huge. Also the pressures towards who thinks in a different way are also huge. And we know biotech is also a part of the big solution. We heard you all talking about it, right, in different forms. So I really like to open this debate in one way, to go maybe to each one of you and see what is the biggest challenge when we have this type of big gap, where we need to be in 2050, doubling the protein need, with an industry which is already big. We're an emerging industry which is showing a lot of resilience and a lot of capability, but still small, and where infrastructure, compared to the traditional infrastructure, is going to be the biggest challenge to scale up. So, who wants to start first?
With the biggest challenge? The biggest
Whatever
challenge,
you think is important in this type of
sure.
debate.
Yeah, I'll lead it, and I'm sure that the others will also have a contribution. I believe the biggest challenge with especially precision fermentation in synthetic biology is yield. It's simply yield. And that's where we have an advantage using our AI platform, is we're able to predict expression with an extremely high level of confidence. But even with that, that's our biggest challenge today, is finding the right strain and then the process, but mostly the strain, to have yields that make these great ideas actually commercially viable. So that's the biggest challenge, and we believe that we have an edge with our AI technology for sure, but it's still even a challenge for us. So definitely keen to hear from the others on that challenge, especially because we're targeting functional ingredients with a very low dosage in the final application. So that gives us, that's a filter that we put in place ourselves, and also we're searching only for proteins that come from plants originally. But aside from that, it's still a challenge.
Thank you. Who goes next? Lady next. Who of you two?
Yeah, so yield and I guess the scale up of the production, because we need to reach high scale. Maybe also the fact that we have to adapt the process to each protein, because there are, some are more or less easy to develop, to produce. Yeah, we'll say that there are some interesting challenges, technical challenges, to overcome.
Yeah, I think we need to overcome some mistakes the pharmaceutical industry is doing. So basically, they are using technology from 30 years behind because they are not really ready to adapt to new things like having a really controllable bioreactor and really digitize everything. So we need to develop technology that a simple technician can use, that no biotechnologists are required to really make it happen and lower the price. And I'm not really thinking about going up and up and up with scales, but really going down and scale out, like having a modular system with several bioreactors in parallel instead of running 500,000 liter bioreactors you don't have under control because a simple technician cannot run that.
So for me, cultivated meat really sits between the pharma and food industry. So I think that the big challenge is defining what that infrastructure looks like and scales and the new supply chains associated, being able to work with new inputs towards new objectives and scaling that up. I think that'll be the big challenge. But I think it shouldn't be understated, kind of the support we're getting from corporations, governments, universities, startups, investors in kind of new proteins. So I think we're on the right track.
Real quick, if I can hop in here. Eva, I think you bring up an interesting point with the pharmaceutical versus the food industry and how it's kind of completely different equipment being used or needs to be used, essentially. Are you seeing anyone who is, using food-grade equipment to make these food proteins, or is it trying to use pharmaceutical grade and convert it into a food, and that's just keeping the cost way too high?
Yeah, we have a very strong partner for plant engineering. I think they're one of the biggest players in general. They're German engineers, and they have a facility in Austria to build pharmaceutical equipment and also in manufacturing industry in north of Germany, where they produce food equipment. And they really want to produce our bioreactors in Germany in their food facility, that they can lower the price for the assets. I think that's extremely important. So the asset costs are extreme. This is why we want our partners to pay for that and not ourselves. Also because it should be produced local and not like we don't want to send our products all around the world. And yeah, I think this is really the way to go. We need to involve all the stakeholders and think together how to make it happen.
And Valerio, from Novozymes' perspective, I know you're kind of a startup within the larger Novozymes community, but is that somewhere you're looking to, using Novozymes' presumably larger bioreactors, or building your own?
No, well, absolutely not. We don't want to build our own. We're inside Novozymes exactly for that reason, because we can leverage the more than 35, 40 years of fermentation experience to then bring it to fruition for our own needs. I think you need to be very clear on the business model that you want to pursue when you want to get into a new space. And are you going to be a fully integrated ingredient provider? Are you going to work for strategic alliances with maybe some of the companies we see here and accelerate the innovation instead of wanting to do everything by yourself? I think there's an overall theme of democratization of innovation, I would call, that needs to take place. Each one of us is thinking of their own thing. We have many of companies here, 10, 12 people, everybody looking for their own funding. How if we really get all together and really try to solve the problem, each one of us with its own capabilities, each one of us putting in the value chain the different capabilities we have. I don't think we're mature yet enough, because we're thinking about money, we're thinking about, we all have the great picture. But I think when you think that you have such a big problem to solve, I mean, doubling the protein needs by now in 2050, I think this piecemeal will not help us to solve it. But each one of us has some pieces of this puzzle, but we need to put the puzzle together. So we in Novozymes obviously have taken this approach of launching various ventures inside Novozymes to explore new areas. And if there is an opportunity, like we think in the protein space, there is a big opportunity for us to apply our technology. We adapt our technology, we really work on it, and we want to work with other people, because sometimes the solutions are not necessarily only in-house, but they're also in the periphery of what we're doing, and that's why we're here in the Plug and Play event.
And thanks for the plug. And just wondering, I think this is a pretty unique problem, but I'm also not been around for a terribly long time in my life. So I'd be interested in your guys' opinions. Is there a parallel you can draw to a different type of industry that's facing the similar type of issues, where really high CapEx needs to happen, and then, it's a very startup versus big industry piecemeal, and how do we fit it together? Or is it, one of a kind?
It's pretty unique, right? Because the ambition that we see, the opportunity, the size of the opportunity, especially for proteins delivered via precision fermentation and all their guises, doesn't match up with the installed capacity today. So that's what I'd like to actually speak to, is the capacity. To just following on from Valerio and Eva, there's a lot of talk about, and one of the questions we get a lot is, okay, well, how do you see the capacity? Because we're also going to partner with external parties to actually produce our proteins. How do you see the capacity in the future? And I do believe that the capacity is going to evolve. I mean, it's behind the ambition for sure, but it is going to evolve. And there's a lot of stainless installed, right? Especially in Europe. We had the milk flood about almost 10 years ago, with the deregulation of the dairy industry in Europe. There's a lot of stainless steel out there, and if our ambition is to be met, where we're actually going to replace a lot of these dairy proteins and meat proteins, there is going to be stainless out there that can be converted into bioreactors. So then, just following on from what Eva said about making this really stupidly simple, that's really important actually. We're not talking about a pharma process. It's a food fermentation process. And we can make bioreactors out of much more simpler equipment that's being used in the pharma industry. So the question of capacity for me is not around stainless, it's around people, because we don't have the expertise. There's a severe lack of fermentation expertise in the industry for any application. That's the capacity constraint we have today.
I think I read a paper recently that said microbes all dressed up with nowhere to go. Essentially, there's startups everywhere that are making these really cool precision fermented products, but there's literally no capacity for upstream fermentation.
It's really hard to find people. And for in our experience, it's hard to find people with expertise on fermentation. I mean, we're drawing from a lot of traditional fields like cultured dairy products and maybe the wine industry, brewing. But there's a pretty limited number of people as an installed expertise base today. And then there's all the DSP associated with precision fermentation, which is fundamental, of course. We need to remove certain elements so that they can actually fit regulations. The expertise is definitely the constraint, actually, for me.
And is that there's no third-party manufacturers out there that have the facility to actually utilize?
I'm talking about the expertise anywhere. So in the startups, such as ourselves, in larger companies like Novozymes, and then in the CMOs. The capacity of CMOs is going to have to increase. So you're going to need more expertise in the CMOs to actually design processes and then run the processes. So as Eva mentioned, the processes need to get simpler as well. There's a lot to develop in that aspect as well.
I would like just to maybe add to the debate a similar. You asked which industry had done that. There's no analogy between what I'm using as example, but the car industry is a very good example. You needed one important player called Tesla that changed the paradigm. It's not that BMW or Audi or all the other manufacturers didn't have then batteries and nothing. And now by 2035, we're all going to drive electric cars. I don't mean the same thing will happen in the proteins. There will be no cows. I think there's space for everybody and everything, but there's really need of a big paradigm change. And I think governments will play an important role. If you look at Singapore, for example, these guys are putting a lot of funds. The Singapore government is putting a lot of funds through to start creating a scarcity, a nation which doesn't have land, which by default cannot have cows, cannot have a lot of other things, and they move from a 10% dependency of Singapore products made in Singapore to 30 by 2030. Those type of challenges which will probably make the paradigm shift. There will be a few countries which will lead. In US, we see a lot of this already happening, but it's mainly private money. But there will be more and more of these things happening in order to make this whole industry flourish, because it's a new industry, basically, we're building.
And not to beat the analogy to death, but Tesla has made gigafactories essentially, and they're the main player in the electrical car space. Is there going to be that similar kind, or if you look into the future, what do you see? Is it a similar type of industry where you have, one or two companies, I think just bought 2.5 million liters of bioreactor space. Is it going to be similar to that, where they're the gigafactory in a sense, and then there's a bunch of smaller players trying to figure out where to put in, or more of, let's say, like an AWS, where they built out the infrastructure and then everyone's renting off of them?
I think it would be a little bit like we have alluded to it. It needs to be very simple. And there might be a licensing model where somebody will create this licensing model where can you localize this type of capabilities, which makes this more democratic. It's the democratization of innovation I was saying. Because this needs to be, the localization element is important. You want to move things around, right? So if you can do in different plots, in different places, different these type of plants, that would be probably a way of creating some of these solutions. We're talking about really future, but the future is probably in 10 years' time, it become a reality. But there's a paradigm change that needs to happen. It's not the 100 billion of investment. At the end, let's face it, also regulatory is a very important player here. Today, there's only 2 companies in this whole space which had 2 new type of regulatory approvals. One is Impossible and that one is Perfect Day. The rest, we're still struggling to get through. So the regulatory environment will be very important to go in hands, but that will be a big barrier for us to overcome food regulations and skepticism about biology applied, biotech applied to food. So I think there's few parameters that will either accelerate and consumer acceptance, we discussed it before, regulatory, infrastructure, and technology innovation. These are the 4 enablers that can create higher growth in this industry.
And I want to touch on regulatory again, but then also circle back to the localization point that you brought up. As far as regulatory, I was at Future Food Tech in New York last week, and label claims for a precision fermented whey said non-animal whey, which I thought was like a very clean, nice label for precision fermented whey. What are you seeing? What would your ideal be for the space? And maybe this is a good question for our 2 cheese companies here, but what would be an ideal kind of regulatory label? And then what's a regulatory label that you think would be, oh, that's going to kind of kill this industry? Like, where do you want to see it going?
I guess that a good label would be milk protein and not say too much on top of that. I think that actually consumers are looking to alternatives that are very close, and I think it's good not to talk too much about the technology behind that. For example, avoiding words like genetically engineered or things like that, and be closer to actually what it is, milk protein.
And if we do end up with like a genetically engineered product, how much do you think that's going to affect overall acceptance in the industry? Is that going to, are consumers going to be shying away? Is it going to delay 10 years, kind of put on your future-looking glasses? How impactful is the regulatory aspect to consumer perception?
I just come in here. I don't think we can shy away from that. I mean, the fact that there's going to be obviously what we call a GMO debate needs to be put up front.
Absolutely.
I think in the US, there's this probably new labeling coming through about biofood, which I think is opening up the discussion. Not by chance, many of these, both Perfect Day and Impossible, have been approved by the FDA in the US. I think US is leading the way in this type of space. Frankly speaking, biotech is part of our life, willing it or not. We touch biotech every single minute, either through the pharma, either through dietary supplements or other forms. So I think we have to be aware that the challenge is so big that either you keep on having cows and the chickens and pigs, or you need to start opening up to biotech as an application. He's a good example. He's been talking about it. There are other ways in where we can use it. We should not shy away from this type of debate. But it will be a big debate over the next few years. Maybe you can add something.
Yeah, I was going to say we shouldn't forget we use these technologies already in food we consume. In cheese, we use fermentation already to produce certain enzymes. We use GM corn in European cows. And so we are consuming bioengineered foods already. I think genetically engineered is a label that has negative connotations. Bioengineered maybe is an alternative that's better, and there is that distinction in the US. But I also think that cultivated meat, for example, there are some companies doing genetic engineering, but it doesn't have to be genetic engineered. It is real muscle, fat, connective tissue at the end of the day that is not genetically engineered. So yes, there's a bit of work to do on labeling, but I think if you get regulators on board, governments on board, that brings a lot of consumer trust as well. And so I don't think labeling perhaps will be a big problem, again, maybe 10 years down the line once these new foods are commonplace in supermarkets, for example.
Paul looked like he had
Yeah,
something to add.
absolutely. So one distinction, regulatory approval and labeling is not the same thing. There's obviously a big link between those two, but regulatory approval is the ability to actually sell your ingredient, include it in a formulation, and labeling, of course, is where we start to create a marketing value on the back of the label and then potentially on the front of the label as well. So the large majority of our products that are functional proteins looking to replace additive technology, for the US, we have a positioning as cultured plant protein. So it's in each of those three words is very neutral or positive to consumers, so we feel comfortable about that. And the three words together very elegantly explain what we're doing. So it's cultured, and I agree we absolutely must confront the challenge of communicating genetically engineered ingredients with the consumer. We can't shy away from that. Yes, it might cause a little bit less traction than we hope, but this is the only way. Otherwise, there'll just be backlashes against what we're doing. So cultured in the US, you're probably all familiar with the term. It's used a lot when we ferment anything, and that's what we're doing. We're producing our proteins with fermentation, and the source protein it's identical to the source protein which is coming from a plant. So cultured plant protein for our particular functional ingredients. And then, of course, when we get into enzymes and other things that aren't specifically labeled in foods, things that might go under a color or a flavor, then, of course, we start to look at those regulations, which are much more favorable, especially on the enzyme side, to genetically engineered products.
And then I think we have 5 minutes left here. I just want to circle back to this localization idea that you brought up. And what kind of impacts do we see outside of, the ability to create animal proteins and other products through yeast and bacteria and whatnot? What other kind of cool new consequences or like positive effects will the precision fermentation space bring, say, in 2035 when we expect it to be at price parity, if not better than price parity? I think the localization one is definitely one of them, where you're bringing food independence potentially to any country that currently doesn't have it. But along with that, is there anything that you guys would point to saying, wow, that's a really exciting potential for this industry?
Maybe I can answer that. Like, I am talking to companies in US, Canada, Singapore, and Australia, and all of them are very open. So the private sector there is very open for this new products, and they want to invest themselves. So they want to produce in-house. I'm from Austria, and I'm also talking to people in the DACH area. They are not fast adapters. They don't want to have this technology anytime soon, so they also cannot convince their executive team. So we have another strategy here. Like the brew consumption is going down a lot within the last few years. Many brewers will go bankrupt. So we have a strategic partner to revamp already existing breweries to produce protein in-house. So this could be another way to produce the proteins local.
I can add maybe, we're a supplier to cultivated meat, so we're doing a lot of work in being able to source sustainable and more supply chain independent ingredients and include those in the formulations that we create. So you could think about, the 1 billion+ tons of waste that's produced in plant processing today, waste that is not viable for consumption but still contains a lot of those nutrients required for fermentation or kind of cell culture. And so through this kind of delocalization model, we're democratizing growth media, enabling producers to focus on those things that were mentioned before, like taste, affordability, convenience, whilst using tools, for example, in media or maybe in bioreactors to get to scale and price parity. So the more we can have competition with products in front of consumers, the more companies are able to use the resources on innovating in those key kind of consumer areas, the better in our eyes. And we want to be part of the solution that enables this industry to succeed, rather than be a brand maybe that's trying to produce all the cultivated meat in the world.
Yeah, I think you briefly touched about upscaling side streams. I think this is a big theme. A lot of these side streams are going for either animal feed or for burning or for other things as a possibility, and we know this from Novozymes, and I mean, using proper enzymes, you can really create something more valuable for human nutrition out of these side streams. The brewery industry, for example, creates a lot of side streams, and that's something we're actively pursuing and looking if we can play a role, where fermentation technology with enzyme playing a very important role there. So you really need to look to the entire value chain. I think what's also important to put the FMCG companies also in the middle of this, because very clearly many of us, at least here on the stage, we're very far away from the final user. And the final user, you need to create a delivery model where any type of new ingredient, any type of new solution is capable of entering into the value chain of a food manufacturing company. For example, in the US, you see the power of distribution of some of these, and Unilever, Nestle have, and Danone. Today, Danone, nobody knows that, but is one of the biggest alternative protein suppliers to the consumers. If I remember well, the data was around 2.1 billion, and nobody talks about it. So we really need to engage with these large companies, because the power of capability of reaching out, not only on the supermarket, but in the different distribution models is very important. Today, Perfect Day and Impossible are doing a great job, and Beyond Meat, as you know, are doing a great job. But the biggest pain point is how do you reach out that distribution level in order, again, you make available the food, you're a great cheese, maybe you need a big company in the cheese sector to be able to do that. So I think this dialogue and this continuous working together will also to help some of this paradigm shift that we need to have in this type of area for early days.
Well, I think that's a wonderful segue into potentially going downstairs and trying some of Nathalie's cheese, because we have about a 15-minute break, and then so bio break or grab a drink or again, some cheese or a croissant, and we can reconvene here, I think, at 10:40, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Gabby? 10:40. So that'll be the plan. I'll give you a warning about 5 minutes out. But thank you again to all of our panelists.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming back in a push to be a little bit punctual. I'm sure people will still be filing in from downstairs, but we'd like to welcome the next startup on stage, Josune with GenBioma. They're using cutting-edge microbiome. They're a cutting-edge microbiome company that's dedicated to making people healthier through microbiome-targeted solutions, and they currently have a diabetes-focused product in the market.
Okay, thanks, Alex. First, thanks to Novozymes for selecting us between many startups that are here and not here also, and plug and play. Thanks too much. So I'm going to present very quickly GenBioma. I am Josune Ayo, the CEO. So GenBioma develops probiotics to study the microbiota, see the impact on diabetes and metabolic disorders. So that's the goal. Yes. Here is the main slide that I want to remark with you. So the opportunity is that we can regulate the microbiota and then see how can we impact on metabolic disorders. Basically, the glucose metabolic disorders. And to see how we can act on reduction of diabetes and prevent diabetes. That's the goal. How can we do it? Our solution is based on probiotics, symbiotics, and postbiotics. Postbiotics is inactivated strains. So we measure the impact on body. How can we regulate the glycemia with different parameters, and to check the metabolism, the impact on short and long-term effectiveness. That's the main goal. So the market is quite huge because we aim to diabetes-related conditions, not diabetes, at all, but pre-diabetes also. That's the previous status of being diabetes. So our business model is B2B, pure. We do not B2C. So we have licenses and exclusivities on our strains and microbiota modulators. So we have the interest of strategic partners in the food and pharmacy sector. In fact, we are a food ingredient. However, we also go to the pharmacy channel also. So remember, Frederick, we are doing big food for the big health. In this case, big ingredients for the big health. So funding to date, we reached 2 million, and we are going to ask for a very round for this year, just to end the clinical trials and open the market early next year. Is because we are in early stages and we need to finish that. So that's basically the company. So as I told you, the problem is very known, so I'm not going too deep on that. Pre-diabetes is the goal, is to prevent diabetes. We can act in early stages of development. Then we can, so pre-diabetes is when you have higher blood sugar levels, not enough to be treated as diabetes. So you are healthy, you are not medicated, but with high risk to be diabetes. So remember your blood sugar levels and see if you are pre-diabetes. That's the point. We can act there through the microbiota modulator. Okay? That's why the impact is not only on type 2, type 1 diabetes, it's pre-diabetes, and gestational diabetes is another goal. So we are doing metagenomic to check what's happening in the gut microbiota and check the mechanism of action for short impact and long-term impact by measuring different markers. There's a flag prospect downstairs if you want. So it is a food ingredient. We have a collection of probiotics. First is PA1C and also final formula of capsules. So we have science behind. We have preclinical trials and running the clinical trials need to end, we know. So a strong IP, I will let you know, with a patent. And of course, the safety. Okay, the safety is checked. It's not a novel food like a Carmansia or others. So another opportunity is that we did a scale up because it's very easy to grow the strains that we have. It's not a strictly anaerobic, so we jump very quickly the industrial scale up. And the result is a competitive cost. Okay. So here you can see the strain. One of the strains that we have is PA1C and some of the formulas. We also did the scale up of the postbiotic that is inactivated strain that is also demonstrated that is effective, and symbiotics also. So these are our microbiota modulators for reach this goal to regulate and improve these parameters. There are many preclinical trials there. So we are testing the short effect on fasting blood sugar level. How can we improve the pancreatic insulin secretion and all these things? You can find it published early for the next. And we are also running 2 clinical trials in different hospitals. So how can we do that? First, we join the best for the scale-up. So we try to find the best manufacturers of the expertise. So we join that for the scale-up in Italy. So we did it in 2 facilities, in fact. So that's why we are doing this very fast because of the other partners that we joined the company also. So also the scale-up of capsules is done. And the human trial is going. Sorry, this is the state of development, briefly. For the next year, if it works for the clinical trials, we will jump to the gestational diabetes. And of course, there is a very important knowledge before starting the company. I am expert in human health, but with very huge expertise in other startups for animal feed, for probiotics for animal feed and the impact on health. So basically, having a good external advisory board from the scientific point of view and also for the industrial, it has helped us to reach these goals and for the next year. Thanks.
Thank you, and I apologize because I was clumsy and dropped the clicker and our timer wasn't working. So we will try and fix that for the next startups. Just look at me periodically, I guess, and I'll try and give you a 1 minute warning, roughly. So next we have Eagle Genomics. We have, spacing on your name, I apologize.
All right, Artem.
Artem, my bad. Thank you, Artem.
Thanks, Alex. And I guess I need to click, right? So here we go. So very nice to be here. And again, this is probably one of the first in-person events. It's fantastic to see a lot of people are interested in the topic. Thanks to Novozymes and Plug and Play for inviting us. And and I wanted to start with probably simple questions. So we're here today, and we talk about microbiome, right? So, but how many of you heard it before? Well, pretty much everybody, right? So you also should be comfortable then with an idea that you're not just simply human, but also microbial, right? And if we took on, and that's probably one of the important things to bear in mind, that we're actually on this planet, we're just passengers, right? So we contain more microbial cells in our body than human cells, right? And if you look in genetic information, it's even worse. We're by latest estimates, 3% human, right? And the rest is microbial. But that also brings us to a lot of interesting possibilities, because microbes, they do rule the world, right? They are, if we are just, whole biome, right? So we're human, we're microbial, but that goes to many, many other different systems, right? And that goes across the planet, and that grows across different sectors which we then can develop. So it actually contains a huge economic opportunity. The idea there is that we're not just looking microbes as enemies. Well, pathogens are there, right? So we need to fight them one way or another. But we also can harness the beneficial part of it. And the idea of how to do it is coming more and more into play, and that can be envisioned through One Health approach, for instance, but there are many others. Microbes are also present in wastewater treatment, in the waste upcycling. We can think about many opportunities. And at Eagle Genomics, what do? We actually trying to harness this potential through data. We're a software company which provides possibilities of linking data to scientists for regenerative and sustainable economy. That's the idea behind. But again, the applications are multiple. We can think about whole this chain, from soil to farm to fork to gut to health. That's where all the microbial interactions are. So today we're looking at multiple interactions between plant and microbes, in possibilities in soil. How do you characterize? Because you see, we talk a lot about carbon sequestering today, right? But the only living part in soil is microbiome. So this is the idea, and this is the things which are going to be helping us to increase the yields of the necessary ingredients that then we can transform from, for instance, microbial fermentation. So why and how we do this? There is as I said, it's a software solution, which is based on the technology which is called a multi-layer hypergraph. It's a possibility to interrogate your data from different angles. It can be a subject, it can be a study, it can be a cohort, it can be a subgroup, depending how you look at that. And of course, that gives you a couple of big opportunities. One is the discovery. You can look for new things. And the other one is repurposing. So you do have certain assets, you have the possibilities already and knowledge which you are acquired. but you can reposition this and look how that can be used in a different area. Then after that, you have a multiple suite of different pieces of software which can give you exploration, valuation models. You can rank your different candidates. You can make network analysis, and then, of course, explore and make more connections. This is targeted to people inside of organization, but you can also work with people outside of the organization, because what is important here is to have the data in the compatible formats. But knowledge partners, which are outside the organization, can also provide a lot of insights into this. Finally, yes, we do work with multiple customers already. So our first customer was Unilever, and mainly in the beauty and personal care space. Their Zentim toothpaste, which has the claim on healthy oral microbiome, was using the Eagle Genomics technology behind it. It's also spun out into Dove and other brands. We do work, for instance, with Cargill on several possibilities of exploring how different ingredients would affect microbiome in animal space. Well, again, whether immune or other outputs. There are a lot of other projects, for instance, around food additives, but it also can be looked at the different maybe more simple examples where how the disinfectants affect the microbiome on the skin. Well, with all of that, so we are 150 people strong today. So we're not necessarily a startup in the perfect terms, but we're more a scale up. We're VC backed, so we are always looking for possibilities to engage in the conversation for the next rounds. But what we're looking for today is to find the possibilities with the corporations to accompany them on their microbiome journey. And we really want to do it through data, combining the power of all this, emerging science. Yeah, we shouldn't forget this is science which is just 15 years old, and bringing these insights and helping and solving the problems in generative economy and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Artem. Appreciate it. And last but not least, for our functional food startup discussion, we have Lycotech and Ivan.
Good morning. Oh, is it okay? Yeah. I would like to introduce to you a new group of fungal fermentation products for health and beauty we call Imperox. Imperox is based on anti-inflammatory molecules produced by fungi in blue or white molded cheeses and some other food products. They're particularly targeting a downstream of the inflammatory cascade, which has acidic environment and which is really challenge for many drugs, including anti-inflammatory drugs like steroids. And we thought these products will be particularly beneficial to support health of organs which have acidic pH, like stomach or skin, and can be applied in different forms, oral or topicals. Okay. Today, we know that about 40% of old adult population globally have gastrointestinal problems. And we have some products already to support the health in the gut. We have products support health in intestinal health, in the intestine. We have some product to support liver health. And I'm talking about products outside pharmaceuticals, like functional food and supplements or nutraceuticals. We have some product for mouth health, from mouth microbiome. But apart of maybe soda water, we don't have functional food or nutraceutical for the stomach health. And we validated Imperox products in a number of laboratory studies. This is only one of them. It shows that these products can inhibit bacterial propagation. I need to specify this is particular intracellular bacteria, and it's not antibacterial product itself, but it's strengthen the cells to sustain impact of bacteria proliferation within the cell and save the cells and stop propagation. You can see on the left slide green clusters of the intracellular bacteria, and on the two follow slides, different doses of Imperox. You can see the dose-dependent inhibition of propagation. This study and some other studies were already published a few years ago. I'm myself a medical doctor. Whatever we develop in the lab, we need to validate in the clinic and validate in a targeted population, not in the healthy people where you can't see very much changes in their health. This particular slide shows the it's a fibroscopy photographs of the person who had erosive gastritis. On the left side, you can see it's a red lesions of the dotted hemorrhages, obviously a sign of very active inflammation despite taking medications. On the right side, you can see this lining of the same person, lining of the stomach, where the inflammation gone. Intellectual property package we have, it's a treatment target. It's a screen for bioactives. It's also composition of matter, methods of extractions, and new methods of prevention and treatment of inflammation. We have a patent application lineup, know-how, laboratory, and clinical data. This is our small team. We are based in Cambridge, UK, but we have a group of laboratories and clinics who work together in different countries. Historically, our company business model is licensing out our IP technology, our laboratory clinically validated products, and using our expertise to partner with them with licensee for new product development. To date, we have 2 nutraceutical deals and 1 for chocolate, functional chocolate development. And these deals generated revenues, which help us to develop our own pipeline. Our ambition, our strategy for Imperox to maximize its commercial potential. Would like to enter with the industry to develop new range of nutraceuticals and new range of premixes for functional food and beverages to support stomach health and skin health and for the beauty. And we also would like to identify what's actually molecules involved in these properties in order to develop new pharmaceuticals. And if the investors join the project, exit for them could be IPO or M&A. And thank you very much for attention. Please join us to be the leaders bring Imperox to the market. Thank you.
All right, time for another panel. So Ivan, feel free to stay. Welcome back up Artem and Josune. And then we also have 2 Novozymes guests as well, Florian and Jerome. We'll get you. And Florian and Jerome, if you don't mind just giving a quick introduction of yourselves and what you do at Novozymes and et cetera.
Yeah, good. First of all, really happy to be here, meeting so many startups and corporate partners. So that's clearly a cool opportunity. So I'm Florian. I'm working in a small team we've kind of recently created in Novozymes that looks after leveraging microbes and enzyme and all that sort of burgeoning space around the microbiota into food and beverage products. So we've heard about a lot of cool examples today, and I think for me what is also very interesting and impressive is to see that with 3 startups we got a pretty good view on different parts of the value chain, right? So how are we selecting and making sure we're using the right microbes to deliver health benefits, and how data is actually a super important asset to get to that. We've also talked about emerging new technology platforms such as postbiotic that you mentioned, Josune, and we clearly believe that there will be a growing number of technologies to really support that emerging industry. So yeah, super happy.
Thanks, Florian. Jerome? May not be on.
No, that's better. So nice meeting you all. My name is Jérôme. I also work for Novozymes, but I work in what we call a strategic opportunity area within Novozymes, which 2.5 years ago was 40 people and now 300, following 3 acquisitions that we have done in the field of health. We are dealing mainly with, where Florian is dealing with functional foods, we are dealing only, I would say, with nutraceuticals, but it could also be skin and oral health, right, with different regulatory statuses. I'm personally in charge of business development and strategy, so external growth, but also one of the 4 ventures that we have. We are organized with gastrointestinal, with protective health, which encompass cardio-metabolic, but also immunity. We have oral, skin, and we also have an important one, which is called brain health as well venture. And I'm leading one of the ventures. I'm very happy here. I mean, we have seen good applications. I think there is we had the taste and the flavors, right? We had the textures, the sustainability. And as you said, I think, Frederick, in the intro, I mean, health comes second. Actually, that's our vision. We want to impact health. And I think, as you mentioned, we are talking about 1 in a trillion journey that we are on in Novozymes One Health. That's what we aim at. We aim to provide biosolutions, right, amongst these trillions of biosolutions that we have around us.
Thank you. And so just kick things up, and I know, Artem, when you started your presentation, you asked who knows about the microbiome. We had a good number of hands, but I just want to make sure we're all grounded in exactly what is the microbiome, what are we talking about, and kind of its impacts on health that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's. I think it's again a multi-trillion-dollar question, right? So what's the microbiome? What's the healthy microbiome? That's there. But yeah, so the microbiome is and certainly a assemble or all the microbes which would live in a specific ecosystem, and it can be our body, and we actually have multiple microbiomes, right? So that's not a surprise to anybody. But it's also, we need to probably distinguish between microbiome and microbiota, right? Microbiome is the amount of genes, and microbiota is actually organisms living inside, and that they will include bacteria, viruses, yeast, and everything what's probably invisible to our eye, right? But they are playing a very, very important role. And of course, that's something that we're new for some time, right? But at the same time, the flourishing of this industry, or the beginnings, are quite recent. So, and that came with probably the last 15 years. Then the genomic sequencing became available and accessible, and that's how the story started. We started to decoding who is there. So today we know who are actually these organisms, and we measure them through abundance or presence, but we still have a lot to discover of what they're actually doing, and are they doing good, they're doing bad, they're neutral, but that's what where we are today.
Anyone have anything to add, or did Artem do a solid job of covering that?
No, but just maybe to link it to earlier, right, consumers, I think it's a recent, right, research area. When we think about it, the first years were about the 1950s, right, but nothing really happened until the beginning of year 2000 with the technologies progresses. Consumers, they are already in 15 years far ahead than where we think they were, right? So probiotic name, I can tell you 15 years ago, nobody knew the name, right? But bacteria was a bad word, right? So it's a very bad word. And then we came to a probiotic, right, name and solution, and now we are in a world where it's a solution, right? It's a health solution, and it's identified. So we are already on the third, right, place, and I think with examples of technologies, we are achieving then the next, which is precision, more or less. So this world is evolving super quickly, and I think Artem is right? It's 15 years, but it's like a digital, right? It has increased as fast.
May I add something? As a doctor, yes, microbiome is it's an important part in our body. Is it working? No, not sure. You press on which one? Yeah, it is important, but it's a balance actually. It's not just microbiome. It's how our immune system control it. It means it's how our body, we can have probably similar microbiome profile, but our body has different immune system. How to react. It means if we're talking about health, for example, gut or mouth or skin, it's a game between two players, really. Bacterial load with its profile and how we resist, how we respond, how we can control it. It means, I think it would be even more challenges, but maybe more interesting, like an Atium kind of company, not just go genome profile of all bacteria, but genome profile of the people and how they interact and what the outcome of interaction for prediction of whatever we're doing with them. Different people respond differently to bacteria profile changes.
So there's a specific perfect microbiome essentially for each individual, but not necessarily that microbiome would be perfect for every individual.
Absolutely. We respond differently because our immune system, and it's not just immune system, because immune system designed to protect us, but also regenerative system, how we respond for the damage. You have a good immune system, but if you not respond enough, you can have chronic conditions and you can't recover.
So like Gembioma, for instance, who,
yes,
pre-diabetics.
Of course. Jerome has told what the consumers are being more aware about the impact of certain microorganisms on the metabolism and the gut microbiota, of course, and they know the probiotic name and know more and more how can they keep health or be healthy as much as they protect their gut microbiota. So it's important to communicate all this new knowledge that is coming, because it's not only probiotic for, the typical intestinal symptoms, but go further than that. So as much as we can do metagenomic and do metabolomic also, because it's important to know that not only the cell alive, but also not alive can have this effect on body. So as much as we know the mechanism of action and the technology is growing with this metabolomic and see how it works, how is the mechanism of action, and we communicate that for the population, it's going to be a very good food application because it's a natural alternative. So it works a kind of long-term effectiveness, basically, but it's a kind of alternative to medication for some point. Or maybe to reverse certain status or to prevent the development of some of the illness. So as much as we do this research, important also to all the community to communicate that.
And Florian, I think you're probably most adept on that space.
But actually, I'd like to indeed build on something you just mentioned, Hosune, and you even before, which is the fact that each individual may react differently, right? So to certain ingredients, to the influence that will have on its own microbiome, right? And that's the space we've seen developing. I mean, I think especially in the dietary supplement space, that's the precision and also the personalized nutrition is something that has been onto certain people's mouths, right? So we do see companies that are developing in that space. It's not yet the case in the food and beverage and functional food space, but we in Novozymes are certainly convinced that that would be the next frontier, right? So how can people sort of pick and choose the right functional food product that would be working with their own system, right? So and actually, how do you build also a business model and offering that can cater to that new expectations?
Yeah, and I just probably wanted to drill a little bit on something that Ivan said on the balance. I think this is a very, very important concept within microbiome development, because actually everything starts with the balance, right? And we really need to be aware of that. And if we're looking at food, the very probably well-known fact, right, that the babies in their development receive with the human milk 40% of the food which is not destined to the human, right? So the human milk oligosaccharides are destined to form the right microbiome, personal microbiome for a baby. So starting with that, going through whole our life, we're looking at this balance which would be formed through food. Because let's face it, before microbiome sees any drugs, right, if it's the normal development, it says tons of food. So I think the major factor which is forming microbiome is food. And then the balance is important to maintain throughout life. And that's why we're probably looking for new solutions, right, which will be bringing back this, dysbiotic states provoked by very different stressors of our daily life. And it might be, pollution, not healthy eating, any sort of interventions which come from drugs or, lifestyle, whatnot. And this is a very important thing. However, we cannot look at in just with just some simple things that needs to be taken in the balance states, and that's why I think I would argue data is important, and we have to look at not just in the specific cases but also on the populational ones, bringing back to the very specific microbiomes, starting with the very specific mother's milk we received when we were kids.
And I think just because we're running short on time, unfortunately, I think we could talk about this for a while, but I want to, since this is mostly focused on food, kind of biotech intersection, I want to look at like the consumer's perspective on just understanding pre and postbiotics, understanding their effects on the microbiome and health and how it is so individualized. What are kind of like the regulatory environments? What is the claim? What are labels? What proof needs to go into saying this is good for diabetes or, et cetera?
Yes, you're right. It's communication. For me, it's a very important. Consumers and communication is one thing, regulatory it's another. And there are different ways today in kind of social media and other things. We can communicate. We need to be careful. It's not commercial, but communication. Education consumers we always need. If you bring anything new, you need to educate consumers and they will follow you. But what you do, you need to have a solid foundation, credibility. You need to have a science, validated science, people can trust you. And then different way of communication. Regulatory can be very modest, you can get around what you put on a claim, but ultimately today we can educate through internet a lot of consumers. And this is a way to do, but what we educate, what we can, our data, how it's working. Yeah.
Yes, of course, we need evidence, of course, clinical trials, but also we need people for that clinical trials. So that's the goal. So communicate to recruit, to motivate people to go to do the clinical trials, to generate evidence, and again to prove that, demonstrate that that's an opportunity and a tool for the dietary management of certain illness or certain to improve health. That's why we need to communicate that, and also considering the personalize of these microbiota. The study of microbiota is, personalize the what is the status of these people and try to balance the gut microbiota for this, to improve the mechanism of action to prevent the development of certain illness. So there is two opportunities here: they study the microbiota and also to see how if you are prone to develop and the study the genetic impact, or combining both, you can prevent certain illness and avoid the medication. So I think personalization is also another input here.
Maybe a reflection, right, on study designs, right, and it's super challenging, right? So I think the science is fundamental, right, to understand the mechanism of action, to prove the efficacy. Regulatory-wise, and I think for the consumers, real-world evidence, right, which is now double-blind placebo control, could be sufficient. But in some cases, when you address very specific areas and specific health benefits, then you need to have these still double-blind placebo control types of studies to convince the healthcare professional, right? So we do observe, so depending on, I would say, the health benefits that we are aiming at, then it is a challenging journey with recruitment, with the designs of the studies, and the interactions with with the ecosystem of each individual. But one thing which is important is that we are talking about healthy people mainly here, right? And so that's the opportunity side, right? We can reach them with media, but we can also reach a big part of the population, right? It's billions of individuals. Some are sick, unfortunately, but we can also address the healthy ones and to help maintain the balance. So I think we have good opportunities.
Just a little bit, because you're right. We have a healthy people. We have people with all the diagnosed disease, but we have people with the health risk factors. This is a kind of territory where pharmaceutical rarely go, but they already have a risk factors measurable. And this is our target population, because at the end of the day, food can never be used as a treatment, but can be mitigating health risk factors. And this is our target population for the clinical trials. But personalization is really key.
Yes, and of course the European Food Safety Authority and others are going to prevent when you are healthy. So that's the goal. Before you go to the hospital and take medication. Yes, that's the key. To prevent when you have high risk too, but with a natural solution and by this new mechanism of action, that is by balancing the gut microbiota with certain microbiota modulator, calling probiotics, post, symbiotic, whatever. But it is an opportunity to prevent, and the authorities here in Europe are changing and are trying to pay attention on the early stages of development on healthy people and prevent. Prevent is the key.
And Florian, I think you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, just an addition. Actually, I think that when you look at the awareness that consumers do have, I mean, they understand much more. Like Jerome rightly saying in the beginning, they understand much more than what we will have believed in the beginning. But at the same time, you have regulation that, of course, are different region from region, right? But they may limit the type of messages that you can convey on the packaging and so on. And so, for food company that are that wants to tap into that space, I think there are new ways for them that they have to explore, right? So they may have been used to really communicate on the product, but because of those limitations, they have to identify new ways to really communicate the science and the effectiveness to consumer. Whether that's through engaging with the broader industry association and building awareness around that, but also that could also be with finding ways to interact with healthcare professional, and so really convey that message of what can those new healthy solution and ingredients, probiotic and so on, really bring to the table, but without being strapped by the current regulatory limitation.
So I want to put forth kind of like one last topic for discussion. Sounds like future state, if I'm understanding everything correctly, is ideally you do your 23andMe, let's say, understand your predetermined health risks, and it comes with a diet or functional foods that you're supposed to eat, personalized to your specific genetic makeup and current living style, let's say. So one, is that a correct assumption I'm putting forward? Two, a follow-up question from the perspective of large industry, how do food manufacturers, large companies make products at that personalized level, or is it do the best you can to choose from what's around you?
I'm not a food manufacturer, but I interacted with few of them. You're right. If you want personalized, people need to assess their health. Some tools to assess their health, because if they cannot see changes, whether how healthy you are. I'm not saying how sick you are, how healthy you are, because there is a gray, parameter, gray area where parameter can change, but you're still within a formally healthy, but obviously something elevated, blood pressure, kind of borderline and so on. You need to have a tools to monitor. It can be tools also with an industry developing wearable diagnostic, point of care diagnostics. We're developing ourselves to support our products. We're developing non-invasive diagnostics. You can have a swab from your skin, analyze 6 parameters we can analyze, and we can change them without clinical trial, not on ingredients, but on the finished food. It's already done. It means the more we have these tools, even maybe go together with the food industry, or functional food industry, I would say, people can monitor their health and adjust and just follow up if there are some positive feedback. Without this, it's hard to personalize.
Yeah, and I would, I totally align with what's coming from the data generation piece. But I would even argue that we are in this 15 years we moved from very data limited space, very much, right? So if you look at numbers, say metagenomic sequences available in 2007, right? There was a couple for thousands, right? And today, well, I mean, last count I've seen probably 3 or 4 years back, there were 20 billion, right? So we are already out there in massive numbers. But that's what brings me to the point that we should probably look into this analysis, because personalization going to be through the analysis of the massive data, and it doesn't need to be siloed. So we need to be probably more collaborative on that, saying that okay, there are probably already enough data available there that can be then looked from the different aspects, from different companies bringing the different solutions. But again, it's also on the population level, then bringing to the specificity of personalization, and it's not far away. But yes, microbiome today, at least gut microbiome, for some other microbiomes are a little bit lagging behind, but that's not going to be a problem anymore. It's moving from the data limited space to the analysis limited space, and that's very important for the industry to understand and have right tools in order to move forward.
Yes, in fact, big data is the next to treat all this data that they are available. But in any case, we need more observational trials, to see what's happening. For example, now we are dealing with some of the hospitals that are looking what's happening in the microbiota of women with gestational diabetes and the offspring, and see what is happening there. And then we are going to join next to see if we can improve that. But we need more information about what's happening. Observational data are needed in certain spaces of this technology application. So it's important also to treat all this data. The technology is growing very fast, but need time to see what's happening there. And talking about the manufacturers, we are not the manufacturers also, but we work close together. After the COVID, they realized that the people know that the probiotics also is not for the gut or the typical function, but also for immune response, and the total amounts of probiotics are growing, and they are increasing their sales, because the people is knowing more and more the possibilities or the alternatives that they can take with the probiotic, not only for this, but also for immune response and other specific health claims or health treatment.
Maybe just to add I would say we do have the chance to have a B2B, but also B2C and B2HCP business model now within Novozymes and Novozymes One Health. So we do have, for instance, sampling of stools, right, with analysis of microbiota for the consumers in the US. Right, so these are important data. They can draw patterns, right, on the microbiota and what is needed by the consumers that are visiting the healthcare professionals, provided that you have the right also advice and recommendation from the professionals. And to your point, Yosine, it's just unbelievable the knowledge that is being developed by consumers on themselves, right? And so you have immunity, you have cardio, you have I think on the gut, both stomach and intestine, it's increasing, but also there are some factors like stress, right? So mental health is also a big piece that will come and is coming, right? And we are I think now already going further into this gut-brain axis worldwide, which is a kind of personalization as well, because everybody is different physically, but also mentally. So.
Well, I think unfortunately that about wraps up this this discussion. Again, another topic that I feel like we could probably have a good hour-long conversation on, but for now, just a teaser, if you will. So thank you again to all of our panelists. Appreciate your presentations, and thank you for joining us on stage today.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving right along for the last grouping of today. So I will welcome on stage Yeasty, and this will be in our meat analogs, or I guess animal-derived analogs is what we settled on, discussion for the last category. So please welcome Yeasty.
Thank you very much. All right, hello everyone. We're really glad to be here and to introduce you to Yeasty. So at Yeasty, we love beer because of its great taste, of course, but also because thanks to it, we can produce a great ingredient for the food industry. And how do we do that? We do that by revalorizing and upcycling one of the fantastic byproducts of the brewer's industry. It's the yeast. And what do we get at the end? We get a super flour, get an ingredient that has some key factors of success. So, of course, we talked a lot about taste. That is very important for us. In terms of taste, we have one very sought-after taste, especially in the, for example, meat analogs industry, is the umami taste that we have. But it's not too strong because we're not an extract, actually. The yeast cells are still complete, so we can go up to 20-30% integration with a great umami taste that will not be too strong. And of course, we also have the nutritional aspects of the product that are very important. We have 50% protein content with all the essential amino acids, but we do not only have that. We're not a protein concentrate or isolate. We also have other factors such as fibers, vitamins, and minerals, all that naturally present in yeast. And very important for us as well, the affordability of a product. We want a product to be affordable, with some prices that are competitive, for example, with pig concentrates, for instance, and we can do that through scalable processes and by having a strong international replicability of those processes. And last but not least, because it's part of our DNA, it's the sustainability of our model, because of course we upcycle a byproduct and because we aim at providing an alternative for animal proteins. So how do we get there, actually? It all starts at the breweries. So from the breweries, we get the yeast, because before that, there was a few ways of valorizing already that yeast, especially in the feed industry. Also in some parts of the yeast extracts as well, some way of valorizing it. But of course, that often has to be a pre-treatment, and some of them, mostly small or medium-small players, have to throw it away. And after that, they have to pre-treat it and then throw it away. So it's a cost also for those type of players. What we do is we get that yeast, and we estimate that there's a potential of 5 million tons of yeast that we can reuse. And we do it by our unique process, that is the debittering process. We get rid of the bitterness of it, of the molecules that cause the bitterness of the yeast, by a unique process that can debitter any kind of yeast, that can work with organic production, and that is currently being patented. At the end, we concentrate and dry the yeast, and we're ready to send that to food manufacturers. It is very important for us to include in a circular economy model all of the different players. So of course, the brewers, we will buy the yeast at an interesting price for them. Then we treat it with our unique process, and at the end, we sell it to the food manufacturers at a competitive price. And what type of applications can we use our product in? So we have plant-based preparations and meat analogs preparations. We also have, for example, pasta-enriched proteins. We could have sports nutrition applications or undernutrition, and maybe later on even, for example, pet food or cosmetics. And the value proposition for them will be, of course, the nutritional aspects, the taste of it, and also the clean and eco-labeling that we also allow. Clean labeling because with one ingredient you get taste, you get proteins, you can also get vitamins and fibers, and we have a natural product that, as I was saying, is still in its cell and is not altered by the processes. And as of today, we have many players that are interested, have shown interest, that are waiting for samples, and actually I'm quite glad to announce you that we're closing our pre-seed round to be able to produce some samples to send to those food manufacturers. So for example, for the vegetarian flexitarian market, we have plant-based, meat imitations, and also dairy imitation players that are interested to test the product. We also have undernutrition players that are interested, sports nutrition that are not shown here. And actually some other industries have shown interest, have come to us saying, okay, we would really like to try the product, but that might come later on, for example, for pet food or for cosmetics. And to tell him a bit about who helped us get there. So we're a team of 3 co-founders, and we also have some great board members that cover different aspects of the company that help us on different aspects, and 2 also are co-founders of great startups. So Hugo is a co-founder of Umiami, and Alexis Angot, co-founder of Insect, that really help us in that industrialization knowledge. And we also are helped by some science partners like Genopole or AgroBiotech business partners, and we just learned that we'll be incubated at Agorhanov in Paris, so that's also great news for us. And it'd be great to keep chatting with you later on at the booth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Le Papandu with tag team. Love it. Sherry Lynn and Philippe. And they're making an egg replacement, plant-based egg replacement. I think they have products as well downstairs that we'll be able to try after the show.
Hi everyone. I will start with one question. When is the last time that you have eaten an egg? Probably just like me, it was a couple of days ago in a cake or even an omelette. And know that you're not alone in this case, because 15 billion eggs are eaten by only the French population every year. It's a huge number that can be explained by the fact that eggs are everywhere, in breakfast, lunch, or dinner, but also in omelettes or all kinds of recipes. Yet, 1/3 of the French population want to replace egg, mainly for ethical reasons, such as vegetarian or vegan people, but also because of health issues, because egg allergy is the most common food allergy in children. So this creates a huge market, around $500 million just in France, and Le Papandu wants to be part of this market, and this is why we developed our product, Le Papandu Battu, a product that will allow consumers to make the difference without feeling the difference. So it's a product that is ready to use, and our first product replaces a beaten egg, so the mix of white and yolk. Then you can cook it scrambled in omelette and also use it as an ingredient in all your favorite recipes. So the plant-based egg market is already booming in some regions such as North America, but also Asia. But Le Papandu has strong strengths to lean on, and for example, his nutrition facts, because Le Papandu is less caloric than our main competitor Just, but also than a regular egg. And it's also a protein source and a fiber source. It's a natural product with mineral and plant-based ingredients, and with a simple and short list of ingredients that consumers can easily understand. We have much less ingredients than all our competitors, but also much less additives.
And who are we? We are Philippine and Sherilyn, two scientists who became entrepreneurs with the aim to offer a healthy and sustainable food in a plant-based egg replacement. And we are not alone, as we have a strong advisory board, which their expertise in food industry, also in management, finance, and operation. And we met two of them thanks to Plug and Play Accelerator program. And since the beginning of our development, we are very supported by Station F, the world's biggest campus in the of startups. Sorry. And they have noticed Le Pas Pondu as one of the most promising startups out of thousands. So we are part of the Future 40. It's the classification of startups where to invest. And speaking of that, to boost our development, who better than investors? So if there is investors here, this is the first time that we will announce the moment of our seed fundraising. So keep it for you. It will be this September. So if you are an investor and want to be one of the first investors, join us to get involved in our company growth. And what about our traction and revenues? These predictions only concern the prediction of our commercialization in France about Le Pas Pondu Battu, which is the first product that we launched. So after 5 years of commercialization, we will reach $16 million about the commercialization only for this product in France. And now we are only at the beginning of our development, commercialization, sorry, because we start our business 3 months ago with restaurants, and restaurants are very happy about our product. They really love it. Some of restaurants talked about us like it's better than egg, about the taste and the texture. And vegan influencers love talk about Le Pas Pondu as one of the most amazing innovation in France. So we are now in a discussion with some wholesalers and B2C distributors. The discussions are more and more conclusive, so stay tuned. And of course, we won't stop here, as we already received some interest from different types of clients in Europe, North America, and Asia. And to finish the presentation, amazing news for an amazing product. Next year, we will launch the world's first plant-based egg that you can see here. Thank you for your attention. And we will be happy to let you try Le Pas Pondu at the lunch break in in quiche and mayonnaise. Thank you.
Thank you both. We got a sneak preview of the next company coming up here, but we have Melton Marble. They're making a fat product for meat analogs, and yeah, here's Anastasia.
Great, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to come here today. Very happy to present Melton Marble. Yes, so I'm Anastasia. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Melton Marble, and we are basically using precision fermentation to produce animal-like fats for plant-based foods. And why are we doing that? Well, as a lot of you know, the potential market for replacing animal-derived foods is huge. It's in the trillions of euros per year. And we really need to displace a big chunk of this market for sustainability purposes. And there's a lot of innovations out there. We're hearing about some of them today, but also a lot of the products that are currently available on the market are not really quite there yet. And one of the major reasons for that is the fat, the plant-based fats that are being used right now. So fats like coconut oil, they just don't have the same sensory properties that you get from actual animal fats. And this is what we want to fix with our technology. So the idea is that, as I mentioned, we use precision fermentation. So basically, we work with yeast, we feed sugars to the yeast, and the yeast converts the sugars to fats. But we also go a few steps further and really get into the metabolism of these yeasts and engineer them to produce very specific fat structures. So with our technology, we can basically program them to produce beef fats, dairy fats, seafood fats, whatever fats we essentially want. So basically produce fats with much better sensory properties. And all of this is based on our pretty extensive technology platform that has originally been developed in the lab of Jens Nielsen at Chalmers University of Technology. So Jens Nielsen is a really big name in metabolic engineering, so one of the world leaders in the space. And there's been a lot of activities going on in his group around engineering microbial lipid metabolism. And basically, all of this got absorbed into Melton Marble. And what our platform essentially is a collection of all kinds of tools that allow us to do this engineering quickly and efficiently. So yes, what are the advantages of this technology? So if we're comparing it to like some of the existing technologies, like plant-based extraction, or like some of the newer technologies for producing animal-like fats, our technology is competitive on a lot of the categories that are the most important for consumers, such as health and taste and mouthfeel, and health, and of course cost. And also importantly, this technology is very scalable and very sustainable. So what do we want to do with all of this? Where we see ourselves is really as being potentially an enabler for the whole alternative protein industry, because fats are so important for the eating experience across all kinds of product categories. We really see ourselves as providing better tasting fats for a lot of products and essentially making those products better and really helping to drive this market forward. So we are going to pursue a B2B business model where we're basically creating and supplying different types of fats to brand owners. So where we are right now, we are still at the lab scale. We have some prototypes for beef-like fats. That's our first product. Right now we are working on scaling this up, as well as doing various application testing. And at the same time, also starting to work on future products. And finally, a little bit about our team. So our founding team, we're all scientists. So it's me, Florian, and also Jens. So a lot of background in microbial engineering, synthetic biology, etc. Recently, we also had Thomas joining us as Chief Business Officer, and he brings more like the business experience. So he's coming from Cargill. So this is also good. And we also have a team of dedicated metabolic engineers that are doing the strain engineering. And so finally, what is interesting to us is, of course, to hear from potential strategic partners, potential customers, potential investors. So if any of this sounds interesting, please get in touch. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we did it, everybody. That was our final startup for today. So thank you, and I will welcome the startups back on stage for our last panel discussion on animal animal-derived analogs. Yep, that's very settled.
Thank you.
Also welcoming Birgitta from Novozymes, again, if you don't mind giving a quick...
Sure, of course. Yeah, thank you. Oh, so this one works. That one works. Well, yeah, thank you so much for arranging this day. I think it's always very exciting to connect in this startup community. I mean, the energy, the passion here from the scene today is really exciting. And obviously also understanding the new potential solutions, right? That's why we're here. So my name is Birgitte. I work for Novozymes, and I use my time on zooming in on plant-based foods, which is something that's really high on the agenda for Novozymes. It's an area which resonates with health and sustainability, right? And innovating for better solutions, which is really the core of the DNA for Novozymes, right? So a lot of focus here, and we want to accelerate. So why are we here today? This is an industry which is moving really fast, right? The amount of dollars that's put into startups and new players. It's an industry that's new for everyone, for our customers, for our consumers, also in the tech space. And it's very disruptive, right? So new players are coming almost every month. So how can we partner up so we can move fast with the smart choices? We know what really drives the choice in plant-based, but we also know that there are some really, really strong pain points right now, right? The penetration is pretty low, especially when we talk about plant-based meat. So how do we solve that?
Well, I think that's why we have our startups here today, because I think mostly enabling technologies, I would argue. It's working. I don't want to give you the bad mic. But essentially, your technologies help enable a finished product become, have the same texture, taste as an animal product. Les Papandous, you kind of do both in the fact that you have an egg, but egg goes in most everything, so similar in that respect. But what kind of things, I guess, look 5 years out? Where do you see the industry? Is it at parity with the animal-derived? Does it become better at some point? What's kind of the gold rule? Is it just to meet parity, or will it be better?
I can start. Is this working? Yes. Yes, maybe. So I think it's like a matter of phasing. So right now, like the goal is to meet parity, right, and create something that is basically equivalent. But of course, in the longer term, we want to create something that tastes better and is also more nutritious. And this is what's going to actually drive the market forward.
And about plant-based market, it's booming as we find some different problem about sustainability, but also animal welfare. And the most challenge are about how to find a solution for consumers with a great taste, but also that can replace animal products about the taste, the texture, and functionalities. So also it's important to select natural ingredients and to have ingredients like yours with good technologies and good functionalities.
And my understanding is that we will probably beat price on animal-derived products, so plant-based products will become cheaper. I was just having a conversation, I think an hour ago with someone, and we were discussing how that can actually be detrimental to the product, and the fact that two people go to the store and see a meat burger for $5 and see a plant-based burger for $2 and automatically think, oh, this isn't as quality as the $5 burger. I guess, Brigitte, and your thought, is that an issue? Do you just raise the price to $5 and take the margin? What's the thought process there from a marketing perspective?
Well, it's going to be really interesting, but we also should remember that we're still in the phase where 90% of the value in retail is really mimicking, right? So exactly to your point, is it really the choice in the supermarket between the two, or did you already decide that you want to go for the plant-based when you're there, right? So, but I think that something is going to happen there also, because one thing is mimicking today, but what are going to be the solutions in 5 years from now, right? Are we going to see a patty to replace, or is there going to be an involvement of completely different choices out there, right? Which is going to do something around the price as well.
And if I could push you, what do you think it's going to be? Put on the future-looking goggles.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? I don't know what it's going to be, but I think that the consumer is for this target group, right? One thing is that the consumer is smart, right? And they really investigate what's out there in the market. That's one thing. But they are also willing to try new stuff, right? When we look at the core target group right now. So I think it will move into alternative solutions and looking maybe outside of what they normally would eat when we go further ahead. But again, for sure, now the numbers are there, right? So 90% again is mimicking. So that's what we have to solve right now. The taste, the texture, making sure that it's also going to have a nutritional profile. In terms of the pricing, I think we'll go at same level. That's where we're going to aim at.
I think we play on both teams, to be fair, today. From our ingredients perspective, the potential clients that we have, some are really into the imitation, some are really willing to try some different forms, maybe with not the exact same taste. So hard to say where it's going to be, but you talked about the price, and really what might be the common point between those words is the trust that the consumer will have in those products, in the ingredients, in the clean label that we talked a lot about. So I think that is also a common trend, whether it is the imitation or the other way, and the trust that might also allow the consumer to buy at different potential prices. And if you trust the product, if you trust the ingredients that are in there, probably the price might not be that such an important factor. So we'll see. But
And just to add something about it, we speak about consumers that want new product. They love new product, but also they are afraid about new product. So it's important to have a brand and a product that they can trust, with natural ingredients, but also a short list of ingredients, and a product that can replace their animal product, for example, easily.
And I think of the three groups we've had here today, this is by far the most consumer-facing of the groups. So you mentioned that consumers are intelligent, but how forgiving, I guess, are consumers, and how important is it that the first product you put out is at a mimic, or will the consumer come back and retry a good? I'd be interested in all of your takes on that.
At least the latest data I saw on plant-based meat, that's a challenge, right? Repeating, actually, right now. And I think it's, again, the essence of the first experience. And we saw the curve today, right? So as you move along the curve on penetration, how much are you willing to sacrifice? And it comes back to your question again on price, right? Because it moves along the line. So the willingness to sacrifice is really going down as the penetration goes up, right? So we need to fix that challenge first so they actually come back.
And from like a startup perspective, how important is it that that very first product you put out is an egg replica, for instance, or is a meat fat? When you're going through this and you're thinking about launching a product, where does that fall on your kind of list of priorities?
About the priorities, about the launch of our projects, for example, in France, there is only one egg replacement that is launched in the market about pastries, and we bring a solution about cooking. And one of the challenges is to educate people about this new product, because we opened the market of egg replacement in France. So we have to be good about the price, but also the techniques. We have to communicate a lot about the product to educate consumers for this new product. So that's it.
Switching gears a little bit and looking towards, I guess, the state of the industry currently and where it seems to be heading, there's been a lot of pushback on hyper-processing of products. I think the plant-based space in general seems to be very hyper-processed, taking soy, pea proteins, high liquid pressure, high pressure extrusion, and making products that look and feel exactly like meat and have that same fibrous texture. Your products, frankly, are cleaner, I would say, and more sustainable. Don't have that kind of hyper-processing. What was the main driver for you pivoting that way, and how do you think consumers are reacting?
On our side, as we're an ingredient, we enable that lowering of processing, and we, of course, do not have such transformed processes. But still, maybe the fact that we try to also bring forward is the having of them being used to for example, using one ingredient that has different properties, that has nutritional property, that has also taste property, maybe also the vitamins in it. It's something that is not that easy to bring forward because they're used to working other ways, like having the protein, then the taste coming from different other products or extracts. And this is something that we are trying to get into and trying to push the fact that it can actually lower this ingredient list. But of course, the barrier here for us might be the functional part, where they're used to having very special functionalities, whether it's transformed product like extrusion, etc. They really put a focus on the functionalities, and this is maybe also a limit. And this is something that might take a little more time. So we'll see where we get, but that's the reduction list that we're trying to push as well on our side.
Yeah, and it's maybe also a question of balance, right? Because of course, like on the one hand side, like you need to have like certain types of processing to get these textures, right? And to get like a product that looks and tastes and feels like meat. But on the other hand side, because you are kind of basically assembling something from scratch, the producers of these products have a lot more opportunities to basically integrate things that are healthier. So, for example, healthier fats, healthier yeast powders, and all kinds of other ingredients, right? And I think in general, it's kind of the initial focus has been on creating rather like these kind of textures and kind of this feeling of meat. But the next wave is going to be about making these products also healthier.
And I'd be interested in your guys' perspective on the cultivated meat industry and what that's going to do to the plant-based meat industry. I've talked to a lot of companies that are looking towards hybrid products, essentially using a fat such as yours and integrating it into a plant-based good, as well as a cultivated meat good. Is this going to kind of curb the growth of plant-based? Are they going to grow in tandem? Looking 10, 15 years out, where do you see the plant-based space and its relation to potentially growing cultivated meat space?
Go ahead.
So I actually think that potentially like this is a very interesting opportunity for the plant-based space because of course like when it comes to cultured meat, these are quite expensive technologies. So I'm a bit skeptical that it would be possible to like produce something really cheaply. But if you can sort of create a hybrid product with like some meat cells and plant proteins, then you could potentially overcome a lot of the kind of texture problems that some of these products are having now. So I think this is actually might be the future of the industry. But we will see.
I hope they work in tandem, of course. But to be fair, what I maybe think could happen is that flexitarians or omnivores that are willing to reduce their consumption of meat might be also willing to, when they try some meat at a restaurant or at their homes, might be willing to switch the meat, animal meat, with the cultured meat. But they are also aware of the fact that they can actually have proteins from different type of food, and plant-based foods are a great alternative if you make it also easy to cook, convenient and tasty. Both can coexist, and I really hope they will.
From, I guess, the marketing perspective, does it, let's see if I can phrase this question correctly. How does a hybrid product look in the market? Something that has meat qualities, meat products in it, but also is plant-based. Does that make sense? Does it like, why are you combining and not just making a full meat product? How do you think the consumer looks at that type of product?
I think that maybe a year ago or 18 months ago, we were looking at much more at hybrids than I see today in innovations. So I assume this is because exactly what you say, that you don't really get the benefits, right, if you go with a hybrid. I think that the industry, and being part of the industry, had that mindset because we were thinking, okay, so how can we move and make this become more a mass consumption? Is it because we look at the hybrid and then you change the patterns and people feel more comfortable, they still get that meaty experience, but it's a little more healthy, it's a little more sustainable. But at least my experience, but I'm interested to hear more, is that there's been a shift. I don't see as much on the hybrid as 18 months ago, but maybe you're experiencing something else.
So yeah, like when I'm thinking about hybrid, I really think about not so much hybrid from taking actual meat and mixing it up with plant, but rather like meat produced from cell culture, where like you do have like certain sustainability benefits and certain health benefits as well, maybe. And I think like so like what we see now with a lot of the plant-based meat products is like, so the taste is not quite there, right? And for sure, like some functional ingredients and like better fat will take it some way, and also like some additional flavorings will take it some way. But there are certain things in the texture that need to be overcome that I'm not sure can be completely overcome with plant-based proteins. And this is, I think, where we would need to see a bit more of these kind of hybrid solutions. So either something coming from animal cell culture or maybe fungal proteins. So it's of course a question of like what is a hybrid product, but I think we will see this more. But yeah, it's maybe some of it is also about just like developing these technologies a bit more.
This may be an unintelligent question, but cell cultured meat, is that considered non-meat products? If I'm a vegan, would I eat a cultured meat product and feel good about it, or is it still because it's derived from an animal, not necessarily vegetarian? Or do we not know?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it depends of the value of the people. For example, if someone is vegan because of animal welfare, because of sustainability, it's according to the value of the people. But I think cultivated meat is answer to the sustainability problem, and about animal welfare too, because we don't kill the animal, but we extract the cells of animal. So it's a great question, and I have no answer, but it's
but if you look at the drivers, right, of plant-based meat, and you look also of the population, right, there are vegans, which is a really small number of the consumption. That's vegetarian is still a small. If you want to go into mass and flexitarian, it's a completely different game, right? So that's where, and I agree with you, it's not really animal health, which is the driver when it comes to choosing plant-based meat. So, yeah.
That's fair, and I may have selfishly derailed the conversation there, so I apologize, but it's been a question I've been wondering. Moving back to topic a little bit more, you mentioned, we're looking at hybrid products to achieve the texture, the taste that we're not necessarily seeing in the plant-based space. I think we discussed this earlier on a call we had, but none of us would say that plant-based products have achieved parity with animal-derived products. There's still a gap there. What are those factors that need to be overcome? What is kind of new technology in the next 5 to 10 years do you think will make it achieve parity? Is it including fungus? Is it including real fat? What's kind of where do you see the industry going in the next 5 to 10?
Maybe to start with a kind of low-tech products, for instance, like patties are only a mix of different ingredients. Sometimes what they lack, they do not try to imitate, of course, exactly the meat, but they often lack like the protein content. They also see themselves as being at the center of the meal, so replacing really the meat in terms of usage, but actually in terms of protein content, they are often not at the same level. So for the consumer, it might be difficult to project themselves really replacing their animal protein with that type of products. That is my take on the kind of low-tech products that there is out there, is that if they want the consumer to look at them the same way they look at animal proteins, they might need to raise the protein content and show that it has the same nutritional properties maybe as the animal proteins.
And this is probably a good question for Melton Marble and Le Papandu, but you're making products, or we're looking toward making products that do mimic kind of the exact steak, let's say, or an egg as you're coming out with. Like the downstream technologies, the equipment to actually make these products, are those in existence yet, or do these need to be developed? I'm thinking like scaffolding or weaving to make the muscle fibers, and however you would put an egg yolk in a plant-based eggshell, if that's the goal.
Yeah, about the egg, it's one of the problems that we faced out when we developed an egg replacement. So when we did the presentation, at the end of the presentation, you saw the picture of our prototype about the egg one. And this is a product that need the most time of development because there is no machine to equipment to scale up this at the industry. So that we wanted to launch the first version of egg replacement, that is le papondu battu, the beaten egg, to answer fastly the replacement about egg for people in France. And it is also a product that can fund the research and development about the machine to produce the egg one. So it was effectively a challenge for us to find equipment and to develop this project.
I assume so, but Melton Marble, do you have any?
So we're actually a B2B company, so we're just producing the fat. We're not producing the final product. So we don't have that challenge. So for us, it's all about just basically getting the fermentation infrastructure in place. So basically, but how we are kind of approaching it is that we are looking at what are the problems that companies are having with their products and their fats. And one of the most common ones when it comes to meat is the juiciness, that like the plant-based meats don't have the same juiciness that any actual meat does, and this is because the fat is melting in a different way and it also doesn't have the same mouthfeel. So for us, it's about like creating fats that are fixing these problems, and then working together with partners to figure out what are the fats that are fixing these problems. But then on the production side, at least right now, we are just producing the fats. So that is not so much a problem.
But it's going to be interesting what happens with the consumer, I think, already the next couple of years, right? Because if you can get the juiciness, if you can get some kind of bite, right, mouthfeel, but then if you can get additional fibers or lower fat or along those lines, do you really want it to be with the same bite or firmness as if you eat a regular patty, right? So there may be movements. It's going to be interesting for us to follow, right? Because if you really have those upsides on the health side, and if you ask all the consumers, you choose it because of health, right? Is it really true? So do you have to have it one-to-one? Or if you can actually give the additional benefits, will you go with the plant-based burger? We don't have the answer today. Right now, it's we're not really there, but it's going to be interesting.
I think what brings it up, I think, is Beyond Meat, releasing the statement that I think, end of this year we'll have a plant-based steak available, and I think they're definitely the largest company, I think, is putting that out. So I think it'll be interesting to see how consumers react, and if they had the nail on the head with the taste, texture, if it's delivering what you're looking for. So just kind of the impetus for the question. Last thing I want to kind of think about is, let's say we're having this discussion 10 years from now. Again, we're at the forefront of innovation here, right? So I want to kind of understand, assuming we meet the texture, taste, parity, what types of conversations are we having around plant-based products moving forward? Like, where is the next frontier? Because right now it seems to be on the mimicking standpoint. Is it just mimicking and then we're going to continue as life as usual, or is there like some exciting potential for plant-based goods that we aren't thinking about yet?
I can go. I think like one of the nice things about technologies like precision fermentation is that you can produce just about anything, right? Just about any protein that exists, and also proteins that don't exist, right? And same with also fats and other types of ingredients. So what this essentially means is that you can use this technology to create completely new eating experience. And I think, so like once we are kind of past this mimicking and getting better, better health profiles, I think we will see maybe a bit more of this push towards like completely new products that provide completely new sensory experiences. This will probably not be maybe in the next 5 or 10 years. Maybe this is a bit longer down the road. But I think this is like where we're heading eventually with some of these technologies.
Kind of imagine a new color, if you will, and we'll be able to imagine new tastes and textures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like right now, like if you think about like what we are eating, so this is just basically just what we have been able to domesticate, which is a very tiny fraction of what is out there, right? Like right now, we're just scratching the surface.
Consider all the meal replacements, right? That industry, how that has evolved the last 5-10 years. So it could go all the way there, right? What do you replace your traditional meal with? If you get your protein, if you get your fibers, if you get something that's nice, I mean, do you need to sit down and have all the meals that you would normally do today?
A Soylent type product. And then one, I guess, from like a upcycling goods, food waste standpoint, I think the technologies that are coming out are very much on a how do we use current waste streams to create our existing products as you are doing? Again, 10 years from now, do you think we will will we have figured out how to use waste streams in a more efficient way? Will we know how to create products through, existing waste streams? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is really an upward trend. And I also see the interest for that type of products in our potential clients. When we see them, they're really interested in the fact that it's upcycled. So I think it's a trend that is motored by the consumers, also by the industrials, and of course that also encourages some new startups or new companies, innovative companies, to develop those new technologies that can help upcycle some type of foods or byproducts that we were not able to use beforehand. So I think that is only going, and I hope it will only go upwards. Upcycling is something we humans have done for thousands of years in different ways, and today is really gaining that also technological trend, and it's very interesting to watch.
Hopefully we are upcycling all of our waste streams by the time we're getting rid of animals from our feed system, so that all the byproducts that we sell to feedstock is going towards upcycled products. I think that's about the time we have for this conversation. I want to thank you all again for joining us. Thank you all for joining us for the past 4 hours, I believe. We will have more networking, able to have conversations downstairs. Try some eggs and some cheese, I think, are the products we have. I don't know if you were able to bring any fat. Could have been cool. But yeah, I think then there's also a lunch and, again, some refreshments downstairs. So we'll end it there. Last thing, we do have a brand and retail event following this starting at 1:30. So feel free to stick around for that. I think it's focused on Web3, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. Focused on exciting and interesting things. But again, thank you all. Appreciate you coming, and see you downstairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.